Introduction. Do you find it difficult to understand why people do the things that they do? Is it impossible to understand what makes your kids tick? Do you want to have more success at work? Do your people skills need some work? Are you in need of some help when it comes to romance? Whatever reason has made you search for some extra knowledge, this book is here to help you. The key to success in this world is communication, and in order to be good at communicating you need to have good comprehension. In this book, we will make understanding people easy by looking at a range of theories that will help you decode what people are really saying. You'll be able to better understand people, the reasons behind their behavior, and how to get along better with people. However, we have a word of warning about the knowledge in this book. You will understand yourself even better once you have finished reading this book. The principles that will be covered in this book apply to any type of relationship, but we will begin with analyzing people that you've just met or just started meeting regularly. As you learn more about body languages, we will work our way through different relationships and how to understand subtle cues that people have. At the end of this, you will be able to analyze someone from their tastes, habits, and appearance. You will also go through the 6 human needs, beliefs, and values. To round out this experience, you will also get to learn some common theories from psychology and psychotherapy. These theories will help you better understand what drives the people around you. This book is set up so every chapter is a nice bit of information with an exercise and practical application, following each topic. This little section will help you understand the topic with exercises, actions, or something to think about. It will help you find a Chapter 1. Learn yourself to learn about others. In this chapter, we will be covering the following topics. 1. Understanding yourself so that you can understand those around you. 2. Outlining what we can use to understand people around us. 3. How different approaches can be used depending on how well you know a person. 4. The 3 elements of practical psychology. Knowing yourself. If you want to be able to really understand others, then you have to start by understanding yourself. This better understanding of yourself will allow you to understand how internal processes work for yourself and for others. Understanding that some insecurities will change the way we behave will help us realize that this is true of others. You will be better able to understand the way that an insecurity shows itself through self-effacing body language and lack of eye contact. All body language is an expression of an underlying self-belief. The material in this book will be applicable to you on an introspective level as much as it will be about understanding others better. If you find that you are struggling to understand others' behaviors, then you may just have problems understanding your own internal processes. Learning to see these processes, outward expressions, will allow you to start really understanding yourself. You will have to be able to come to terms with some of your own fears, insecurities, and prejudices if you really want to understand others. If you don't try to see your own actions, then anything you see about other people's will come through the lens of your fears, insecurities, and prejudices without any conscious thought on your part. This will be a false image and will make understanding others even more difficult. Being able to understand yourself will also allow you to see the effect, direct or indirect, you have on those around you. Understanding what kind of effect you are having will depend on how well you can see yourself. It will also depend on your significance to that person, how you communicate, and how you present yourself. All these things will change how the people around you will adjust their communication style to suit how you act. If you behave happily and with a lot of laughter, this will change how everyone else acts in a different way. Getting a handle on analytical skills will benefit every part of your life. It won't matter if you're using those skills at work or in your romantic relationship. It will take a lot of work, especially for those that are not naturally analytical, but it can improve so much that it is worth it. You will be able to alter how you look at yourself and improve how you connect with others. But there are many other reasons why analyzing people will be a benefit in the end. You will become self-aware and analytical person. We'll abbreviate this to AP for the rest of the book. Doesn't mean that you only take the time to analyze other people. In the beginning, you will be analyzing yourself. This self-analysis will allow you to be more aware of your own emotions and less confused about the way you feel. This may make some of your actions more explainable to you. Those that are self-aware find that it is less of a challenge to turn negative thoughts into positive thoughts, to adjust how they view themselves, to accept themselves, and to live honestly. Getting to know yourself will allow you to truly live genuinely and happily with others. You will appear more considerate, and AP will use a lot of time and energy understanding the people around them. Most APs are motivated by a desire to be at peace with those around them. This motivation and the outcome are appreciated by the people around them. Because an AP will be taking that time to understand what others are feeling and responding in an appropriate way, they'll look even more considerate. The AP could be a boss that is understanding when an employee needs a mental health day. The AP could also be a friend that will sit on the phone for a long time to work through a tough situation. An AP will be someone that others will know they can rely on. You will become more empathetic during your analyzing of emotions and personality. You will probably start considering why people are feeling and behaving this way. An AP will look at an AP will be able to put themselves in other people's shoes to really understand why people are feeling what they feel. Empathy is an extremely important personality trait. It's especially useful in professional and personal settings. You will appear more intelligent typically. The more analytical a person, the smarter they are. An AP is observant and remembers many of the people and things that they see in their environment. This observant nature makes them appear intelligent during a conversation, even if it is not necessarily an intellectual conversation. An AP will be able to recall information from previous conversations and ask questions that will make an AP appear as if they are educated about the profession. Analytical students remember lectures and conversations with teachers easily. This observance is often met with better grades and better impressions. You will always be prepared. APs are the kind of people that hate being unprepared. If they are late or miss deadlines, they might feel anxious because they know how these things will affect others. APs are typically early to meetings, finish their work ahead of schedule, and they take the time to plan fun dates out in advance. Being prepared for what the world might hand them makes an AP feel like life is slightly less stressful. You will find more success wherever you look. Perhaps the biggest benefit of being an AP is how you will succeed when it comes to things like school, work, and relationships. The ability to analyze makes you more empathetic, considerate, and dependable. Those traits are great for every relationship. You'll be easy to like for people that just run into you on the street. Being able to remember so much and being prepared for so much will help you keep a handle on things in work and school. You will be viewed as a reliable and intelligent member of the team. People will want you to be working with them. Analyzing yourself before you even try analyzing other people, you will find it helpful to analyze yourself. Trying to analyze yourself will be much easier than trying to analyze others in the beginning. You won't have to guess about your thoughts and feelings. Those are readily available to you. The biggest stumbling block when it comes to analyzing yourself is being able to understand and figure out why you are feeling and thinking the way that you are. The honesty that it will take to get you to really analyze yourself might even be painful. However, once you are able to analyze yourself, you'll be able to see your strengths, your weaknesses, and the roots of your emotions. Finding your strengths and weaknesses. Beginning self-analysis may seem daunting, but it will be simplest to start with thinking about your strengths and weaknesses. Your strengths are anything you're good at, anything that comes naturally, anything you like about yourself, and anything others like about you. The corporate world, in particular, fell in love with strengths. It's quite easy now to find quizzes and other methods for discovering what your strengths might be. Among these traits are things like adaptability, being able to easily accept change and live in the moment, and harmony, trying to keep the peace by finding common ground or compromising. These kinds of terms will not fully describe a person, but if you're beginning, then they're a perfect place to start. When it comes to weaknesses, you might actually find this easier to figure out. There are almost always things about ourselves that we dislike. A weakness is something that we struggle with. It could be that you're not the best listener, or that you often talk over people or offer advice that isn't needed. It could be that you're forgetful and disorganized. Regardless of what your weaknesses actually are, you need to make sure that you aren't too hard on yourself. Reflecting on your weaknesses is a very tough and vulnerable experience. Your weaknesses don't have to stop you from living the life that you want. In this part of self-analysis, you need to be open and honest with yourself but remain hopeful about the future. A guide to self-analysis basics. The analytical process will look different for some people. Some people will require a journal or notebook during the process. Writing things down helps people remember their list, but it also helps people process information. Recording emotions and responses will allow you to take a step back and look at the larger view of your life. When it comes to this part, you will want a notebook or journal that you really like, as well as a reliable pen. The best way to do this is to write to that. Thoughts are often automatic and even more often out of your control. When you experience or see something, then you will think about it. Instead of letting the thoughts leave your head unnoticed, you will need to really consider them. There will be events and things that trigger positive thoughts, and others that trigger negative thoughts. Anything you discover about yourself should be written down in your journal. The next step is to consider how you perceive others. This isn't about analyzing people quite yet, but about how you respond to the people around you. You'll be looking at how you react when people are late and then reflecting on it. Perhaps you'll discover that you perceive lateness as a lack of caring. Those people that are late may make you upset. You'll be looking to dig down deep and try to figure out why you think that. Perhaps it was a lesson from your parents or a symptom of low self-esteem. Going the step deeper will help you discover the roots of your emotions, but it doesn't have to be only about the negatives. You might try to analyze events like receiving flowers. If you're truly joyful about it, then perhaps your love language is gifts. This tells you that you receive gifts from people, you feel more appreciated than if they were to do other things for you. This knowledge might help you with your relationships. There's a final step in this guide to self-analysis. You have to also respect your body and the physical responses you have to the environment. Your body might react to things before your mind does, such as in the case of panic attacks, where you will have an increased heartbeat, sweating, and a myriad of other symptoms. You might feel the physical sensations before realizing that an attack is happening. Identify what triggers your physical reactions and try to figure out those responses as well, even if they take you into the past. Other ways of analyzing yourself. There are even more ways of looking at yourself. You might try any of the following. Use 5 words to describe yourself. This relatively quick exercise will force you to think about key adjectives. Write down your core values. Your core values are the code by which you live your life. These traits will be what you strive to be and what you admire in others, like integrity, intelligence, honesty, etc. Knowing your values will help you understand why and how you react the way you do, as well as what motivates you. Consider your most memorable childhood experiences. Our childhoods are extremely influential on our adult selves. Getting to the root of yourself will often involve looking into our childhood. Use your journal to jot down your experiences, positive or negative, and consider how they still affect you. If you had a strict parent and was severely punished for breaking rules, then you might still be afraid of breaking rules as an adult. Write your story. This somewhat vague exercise can take time, but that's just fine. This exercise is particularly good if you prefer written communication. Your story is the essence of who you are. It will consist of all the experiences that define you. You can write down these experiences chronologically, or even just write what comes to mind first. This exercise doesn't have a right way to be done. Don't even worry about the writing being perfect, just write down what you need to write. If you struggle with coming up with ideas, then here's a list of suggested topics. Parents, relationships with siblings, high school experiences, college experiences, first job, first love, how you and your best friend met, favorite books, your bucket list, your greatest fears, your perfect day. Effectively analyzing others, it is important to be able to note the differences in how you act and communicate with the different people in your life to recognize how your actions and mannerisms affect those people. Some notable people in your life may be any of those of the following: your significant other if applicable, your children, your boss, a teacher that you maybe struggled with the most, your parents, a person that you may not click with, your closest friends. You should notice and contemplate how the varying behavior of all of these different people affects how you make yourself appear to them through your own actions. A good way to practice this is to think about how others may consider you in their lives and how that causes them to behave around you, perhaps in a different way than around other people. People you don't know versus those that you do. It is probably obvious that how well you know someone or how well you want to get to know them greatly affects how you see and behave towards them. Your distance from or closeness with someone relationship-wise will define what you have to consider when observing both their and your behavior when interacting with them. This will also eventually help you determine how you will use these insights to better interpret what they are communicating to you. To better elaborate on this concept, 4 examples are explained below. 1. Upon initially meeting someone, you wonder if they are attracted to you. You are interested in them, but wish to get to know them better before you express this to them. Your interpersonal relationship with them at this time is recent and superficial. Additionally, you want to be sure that you are correctly interpreting their signals before you express your feelings in the case that the feeling is not mutual. Their body language, how they speak, and even their preferences. You probably won't get information at first such as their previous history with relationships, but it is possible to be able to subtly acquire details in your first few conversations that you can use later on to determine if and how you'll act. 2. You have an innovation for a business idea and are thinking about expressing this to a coworker. Your relationship with this person is medium-term and relatively superficial. Your reason for wanting to observe their behavior prior to expressing your idea is to see if they would be a suitable business partner and if you two are compatible to work together, and you want to use this information to determine how you should come to them to evoke the best response. Things you need to observe about them are their body language, preferences, impulses, how they verbally communicate, and some minor insight to their personal life and past experiences. Also, defining their drive and points of concentration is very useful information in this case. 3. You and your significant other have been in a relationship for a year. It is getting serious and you are thinking about asking them to move in together. This relationship is medium-term and intimate. You first want to consider if moving in with them would be a smart choice. You want to determine how they're likely to respond when you bring it up in conversation. Important factors that you'll be considering are their body language, preferences, impulses, how they speak to you, and extensive information about their personal life and past experiences. In addition, their drive, points of concentration, and how they go about fulfilling their needs are vital points to consider. It can be helpful to consult friends and family to acquire more insight. 4. Your relationship with your mother is a bit unstable. The relationship between you two is long-term and intensely involved. Your goal is to mend your relationship with her and try to figure out the origin of the complications between you two. Things to consider are her body language, preferences, impulses, the way she speaks to you, extensive information about her personal life, her points of concentration, and how she fulfills her needs. The most enigmatic factor that you need to determine is her motivation. In all of the above examples, the three main factors to be considered are the extent of your relationship with that person, their motivation, and what information and insight you have about them as a person. These three things will define how you can put the acquired information to use, which will be elaborated on later in the book. A good way to put this into practice is to think of three people in your life that understanding them better would be advantageous. Consider the type of relationship that you have with each of these people, why you want to gain more insight about these specific relationships, and how these points will influence the information that you already have in order to properly analyze these people. The three fundamental factors of practical psychology. Decades ago, a business and life tactician by the name of Anthony Robbins started to compose books and give full-day seminars that have assisted millions of people worldwide realize and attain what they want out of life. The principles that he expresses to people are instinctively logical, and millions of people have been able to improve their lives from his teachings. We will be referencing some of his concepts and philosophies to aid us in comprehension of the motivation of both ourselves and others. Psychology is a very broad and complex arena with too much information and specificities to cover in detail in this book, but we will be covering the essential psychological tactics that will help you enhance your analytical and conceptual abilities. There are three main components of practical psychology that are enormously accommodating in regards to deciphering how people's minds work. 1. Fear is the most prevalent factor that holds us back, and is one of the most important emotions that we are capable of. Although it mostly has a negative connotation, fear has actually had an enormous evolutionary benefit. Without it, humans would never have been able to arrive where we are today. If humans were fearless, we would never have protected ourselves from factors that could prove deadly, such as predators or natural disasters. Thanks to this evolution, however, fear is no longer a vital component that contributes to our continued existence. Nevertheless, it is still present and has been instinctually ingrained into our minds, and can cause a wide range of emotions from slight trepidation to intense terror. Understanding fear itself is a key component to understand world's population today. The fear that we are inadequate, and the fear of not being loved. These are fears that have been present since humans were first around and that have evolved along with us. Back in primitive times, there was the fear that we would not be quick enough to catch an animal to provide for our families. This has now evolved into fearing that we will not optimally perform at work, we will get fired, and likewise not be able to support our families. Whereas earlier we would fear being shunned or outcast from our village and left to fend for ourselves in the wilderness, we now fear the people around us shutting us out and thus feeling rejected and isolated. These fears may seem unreasonable, yet they are still present and the majority of people struggle fighting and overcoming them. However, while trying to fight or distance oneself from the fearful situation as the common instinct, it is actually much more effective to just roll with it. For example, imagine a man and a woman are ballroom dancing, with the man representing fear, the woman representing you, and the dance itself representing life, which must continue until the music ends. Until the end point, you must remain present and face to face with your fear, which is intended to lead and control the dance. The more you try to pull away or fight it, the more disorganized and unsmooth the dance will go. However, if you just follow the fear's lead and cooperate with it to reach the end of the dance in the smoothest way possible, you don't exert excess energy dragging it out and advancing the negativity, but calmly approach the end with a more positive resolution. Usually, facing our fears and working with them instead of fighting against them is the most effective way to overcome them. Once this is achieved, we can really start living our lives to their full potential. 2. The significance and emotions that we connect with certain events greatly steers and decides the quality of our lives. There are three factors that define the values that we assign to specific events, the first being the physical impulses that are instigated by an event. These impulses can occur either deliberately or unintentionally, such as keeping our gaze downward or holding a bad posture. Low-energy physical actions link low-energy negative feelings to an event, which is immediately evident to others around you. The second factor is the verbal things that we say to ourselves, either out loud or in our heads. How you can use what you learn to improve in the future. What you tell yourself about a certain event can either bring you farther down or help you develop. The third factor that determines how we assign meaning to events is that of our focus and what elements that we emphasize in certain situations. If we concentrate on a negative point in a situation, that is where all of our energy goes, and we thus correlate the situation with negativity. However, if we can pinpoint a positive element in the situation and focus on that, we can conversely channel our energy into associating the event with positivity. People experiencing depression and general unhappiness tend to constantly pick out the negatives in their lives and focus on them, such as feelings of void, unsuccessfulness, and non-fulfillment, whereas more optimistic and generally more cheerful people focus on bright prospects or things that they are appreciative of. Keeping these three factors in mind when analyzing others can help us achieve a more innate comprehension of how they see and react to situations and scenarios in their lives. 3. There are 6 basic needs that humans possess, all of which determine how we react to the world around us. Understanding these 6 requirements is necessary in order to properly understand another person's views and behaviors. These needs will be further elaborated on later in this book, but in the meantime, the list of human needs are certainty, uncertainty, significance, connection, love, influence, and development. Applying this knowledge in your own life, define your fears and how they affect your behavior towards others, and also how they have been withholding you from positive things in life. Do this also with someone who you are close with. Consider what you think they fear the most, and how this fear may have influenced their behavior, both in the past and in the present. Conversely, think about a scenario that you find yourself in regularly that usually brings you feelings of happiness, satisfaction, amusement, or any other positive emotion. Also bring to mind a scenario which generally brings you feelings of sadness, anger, anxiety, boredom, or other negative emotions. Consider both of these scenarios and the 3 factors that define the significance you associate with these events. Ask yourself what your body language and physical tendencies in these situations are. Ask yourself how your verbal expressions are altered to others. Realize what your focus points in these scenarios are. Is your mind racing, or are you having trouble thinking? Are you concentrating on what is lacking in the situation or what is in front of you? Chapter 2. Using our bodies to communicate. Aside from verbal communication, we all do a tremendous amount of communicating through our body language. Body language isn't the same as common specific hand gestures, such as a thumbs up, or sign language, as these are actually in a way a form of straightforward, verbal communication. Body language more refers to subtle ways in which we alter our body position, facial expressions, or small actions that can greatly influence the way that a person means something or how they are feeling. For example, even a thumbs up can be taken in different ways depending on one's facial expressions or how they are carrying themselves. Even some aspects of verbal communication is closely regarded to body language, because the words that come out of our mouth can have a completely different meaning when accompanied by certain actions or tones of voice. There are some gray lines, however, where certain gestures can cross over. Take pointing your finger, for instance. This is generally a straightforward and clear form of communication, but can also be done unconsciously, and remaining aware of what our hands are doing is vital in order to effectively control one's body language. There are many factors to consider when interpreting body language, including eye movements, stance, facial expressions, and body movements. All of these things can communicate things that we do not say verbally, and can give an insight as to what we are actually thinking and how we are feeling. It is a common question as to whether body language is performed consciously or unconsciously. It is often difficult to simultaneously contemplate both the content of the conversation and what is happening around us. Most of the time, We respond physically in instinctive or automatic ways, and it often occurs that we look back and realize that we communicated something through our bodies that we did not intend to relay. In instances like these, it is common to dwell or reflect on the situation, in hindsight taking apart our thoughts and the other factors around us to try and work out what exactly we were thinking at that point in time. Body language is actually so seemingly instinctive and unintentional that it doesn't require a lot of thinking, which raises the topic of the conscious and subconscious minds. Many motivational speakers refer to this partition when giving seminars. Body language has the power to be both incredibly subtle and incredibly intense. Our subconscious mind can move our bodies in ways to communicate things that we keep hidden within ourselves, such as of Freudian psychology, but those ideas presently are mostly obsolete. To better understand this concept in the simplest of ways, basically the mind focuses on the small pieces of information or environmental factors that are directly in our minds, but aside from those small pieces, there is a vast amount of information running in the background. However, it is possible to go through all of this background information and focus on important parts within it, and even control and rework them. Although body language does in part work with our conscious minds so is performed intentionally, an even larger part is controlled by our unconscious minds and occurs naturally, outside of our control. It is commonly said that the majority of the information that we communicate is done so through body language rather than verbally. One well-known researcher in particular claims that only 7% of our communication is relayed verbally. Some research claims that 55% of our communication is channeled through movements in our faces, most specifically around the nose and eyes. Even though many sources produce different percentage numbers in regards to how much of our communication is physical rather than verbal, one thing is for sure. A good majority of all of our relayed information is impossible without nonverbal communication. Besides physical communication, nonverbal communication is also evident in the use of modern technology when communicating with others. Communicating through text, especially through social media and text messaging on our telephones, can be interpreted in significantly more ways without hearing the voice and seeing the body language that would normally go along with it when speaking with somebody in person. For this reason, the use of emoticons has become increasingly popular as a way to artificially include body language while communicating through writing to avoid misinterpretation. For example, you could be asking someone via text message, "Are you coming to the party?" Although this is a simple and innocent question in context, without the use of a smiley face next to it, it could be misinterpreted as snappy or judgmental. Similarly, saying something as simple as "thank you" via text could mean countless things depending on the physicality or facial expressions that accompany it. Someone could take it as sarcastic, genuine, insincere, and even very deep, such as when accompanied by tears. Although it is commonly believed that the most accurate way to determine how a person is feeling or thinking is readable in their facial expressions besides their actual words, recent studies propose that this is actually untrue. Research states that people are not infallible in reading understated emotions through reading someone's face, and solely observing facial expressions is not enough to fully determine the strength of an emotion or feeling. A study done at Princeton that was based on reading facial expressions only through photographs of faces proved that people were only 50% accurate in determining their emotions without being able to observe the rest of the body language. The increasing amount of information that we are discovering about body language is eye-opening to how complex and incredibly significant it really is. The significance of body language in determining someone's emotions. Body language is a vital factor to consider when acquiring information in order to analyze a specific person. Emotions are expressed through numerous means, but body language can be the most organic and inadvertent way of expressing oneself. Eye movements, hand gestures, and body movements for a large part are performed automatically without premeditation, and can be a great tool when analyzing someone and evaluating their true feelings and thoughts that may contradict the words that they are saying. In addition to using this knowledge to observe those around you, It is also useful to use it to analyze your own behavior and how your body unconsciously communicates when you're talking, and see if there is an accurate connection with how you are thinking or feeling at the time. It could very well end up that you discover that you tend to send mixed signals without even knowing it. The use of body language evaluation can prove especially useful when feeling out somebody that you have been newly introduced to. Even if you have not yet had a conversation, you can immediately gather information about them just by noticing how they carry themselves, how they look at you and those around them, their face, and how much physical distance they keep between themselves and others. Body language analysis can also work in better understanding people that you are more familiar with, whether they are just acquaintances or people you have more intimate relationships with. For example, if you notice that a friend or coworker holds a certain stance or makes certain gestures or movements when they are nervous or insecure, you can better help them by intervening as soon as you notice it. You can use these new observations alongside what you already know about them to understand them even better. Associated with them, elements that impact body language. There is no set, universal definition that states that certain movements mean certain things. Just as different people have different ways of physically expressing themselves, whether intentionally or not, there are also very many cultural influences that affect how people physically communicate. Social standards differ from country to country. For example, in some cultures breaking eye contact is a sign of disrespect, where in another culture it could mean exactly the opposite. For a more specific example, in Finland, eye contact is a sociable and approachable gesture, whereas in Japan, direct eye contact is generally seen as expressing anger or hostility. Restrictions. Although there is much more that goes into evaluating a person other than body language alone, it is an essential basis for it. There are numerous other factors that are discussed throughout the book that you can use in combination with body language analysis to get a full idea of what is going on inside of a person and what makes them who they are. It is something that you will find very useful and will benefit from looking out for it when you interact with people in the future, and you will become more knowledgeable and accurate in deciphering a person's body language, no matter how delicate. In addition, you can also use these observational tactics on yourself to determine and better control how you physically react when communicating with other people to make sure that your body is relaying the same message as your words. Proxemics. Proxemics, a term first described in the 1960s by the anthropologist Edward Hall, is described as how much distance people hold between themselves and others, and can be an accurate depiction of the standing of the relationships between them. Aside from that, it can also portray what a person is nonverbally communicating to the other person, either intentionally or unintentionally. Hall composed a list of distances that he associated with different relationship levels, which is as follows. Intimate deep relationships, 1.5 feet close friends and family, 1.5, 24 feet acquaintances, public speaking, 12, 25 plus feet. These of course are estimated measurements to get a basic idea of how to determine people's relationships by how closely they stand to each other. One would assume that if two people have an extremely close proximity to each other such as a few inches, they are most likely intimately involved. However, it is also possible even for people in a romantic relationship to talk to each other with 10 feet between them. As is the same with all body language evaluations, the list is relative and needs to be considered alongside the context of the scenario in order to correctly assess the situation. Oculesics. Oculesics is defined as the observation of a person's eye movements and way of looking at people, and is another significant factor to consider when evaluating a person's nonverbal communication. Oculesics is a factor that has two main subdivisions that can be observed in order to decipher a person's eye movements in regards to their feelings and thoughts. 1. The first subdivision under oculesics is that of a person's pupil size and how they dilate and contract during interpersonal communication. This is a very subtle factor and often hard to notice, and is a little tricky given the fact that environmental factors can also influence pupil size such as light or focus. Another reason that a person's pupils can be affected by outside factors is if they are intoxicated, which is why police flash lights into people's eyes upon confronting them if they are suspicious. Obviously, in order to really observe one's pupils, you need to be within a relatively close proximity to the person's face. One of the most notable changes in pupil size that you can notice is that there is a connection between pupil dilation and fear, nervousness, arousal, longing, or hostility. The reason for this is that when the fight or flight instinct kicks in, there is a rush of adrenaline into the bloodstream, which ensures that the pupils are at a sensitive peak in order to give the person the best chance to save themselves in a dangerous situation. 2. Eye contact itself has a variety of subdivisions that communicate many different things, which are as follows. Looking downwards. This can mean guilt. Looking upwards. This is an eye movement that can have a number of meanings that varies from person to person. Looking upwards can be an unintentional expression of boredom, or it could also be that the person is trying to recall something. On the other side, if a person is gazing up with their head facing slightly downwards, this could be sending a message of flirtation or arousal. Side-to-side movements of the eyes. This is also an eye movement that can have many different interpretations. Moving the eyes quickly away to the side can suggest that a person is not being truthful, but it is important to keep in mind before accusing anyone that this is not always entirely the case. Looking to the side can also insinuate that a person is distracted either by their own thoughts or environmental factors, or perhaps they have lost interest in the conversation and are losing focus. It could also be that a person is experiencing an auditory memory. If they look to the left, they could be trying to remember it, and if looking to the right, they are hearing the sound in their mind. Gazing. Not the same as a stare. A gaze is holding prolonged eye contact with something or someone. A gaze generally expresses interest, and depending on the scenario, can also indicate arousal or desire. When a person is gazing, they usually don't realize that they have been holding eye contact for an extended amount of time. Staring. Staring is another form of persistent eye contact, but generally is accompanied with the eyes being widened and usually insinuates hostility or dishonesty. However, a stare can also exhibit fondness or interest. One of the most notable differences between gazing and staring is that staring is generally deliberately maintained, even if the person or other subject returns eye contact. Glancing. Glancing generally indicates that a person has a secret or hidden longing for whatever or whomever they are glancing at. Some common examples are glancing at someone's lips while talking to them, which could mean that they want to kiss the other person, or glancing at the refrigerator if a person is hungry. This eye movement in particular can prove especially helpful when analyzing someone's body language when interacting with them, especially towards the end of your contact with them. When people are reaching the point where they are ready to leave, they will often glance at their phones or watches to see the time, or perhaps they will move their eyes to other environmental factors. Closing the eyes. Oftentimes, when a person closes their eyes, they are cutting off their vision of the outside world in order to better concentrate or focus on something that they are thinking about. Conversely, closing one's eyes can also insinuate guilt, dissatisfaction, or impatience, usually exhibited as a sustained blink. Following a person or object with the eyes. Keeping one's eyes on a moving subject expresses interest, which could either be positive or negative. Negative reasons that a person may be tracking someone's movements with their eyes could be mistrust or suspicion. Squinting. Although squinting can simply mean that a person is trying to physically focus on something better, it can also have a mental implication. Usually if a person is squinting during interaction with another person, this insinuates cynicism or that they are skeptical about what they are hearing, especially when accompanied by a frown. Winking. Winking is most generally used to express humor or lightheartedness. They could either be subtly hinting at something, such as arousal, or could simply be using it as a friendly greeting gesture. Blinking. Although blinking is of course always occurring, blinking that is quicker than normal can indicate confusion or nervousness. In other scenarios, it can insinuate disdain. A lack of blinking is the main feature that defines a stare. Stance and carriage. In addition to proxemics and oculesics, the way a person carries themselves or positions their body also tends to be a very accurate gauge of a person's opinion or outlook of a scenario or person. The most notable and common positions to look out for are as follows. Standing. When a person is standing in a given scenario, this generally signifies authority or control. A good example of this is a teacher standing in front of their seated students. Especially in situations where a teacher wants to exhibit their authority, they will take a stance that is physically higher than those in front of them. Sitting. On the other hand, sitting can express the opposite of what standing generally does. A person in a seated position could be expressing submission, insecurity, or inferiority. However, this isn't always true, as it is also completely normal for around one another without feeling the need to express their status. Slumped. If a person is sitting or standing with rounded shoulders and slightly bent over in their torso, not standing or sitting up straight, this could insinuate either insecurity, boredom, or passivity. Open stance. As opposed to a slumped posture, a person who stands or sits completely upright with a puffed-out chest and forward stance, this generally expresses confidence and assurance. The main component of this is the exhibition and accentuation of the chest. Hand and arm motions. Large or excessive manual gestures also signify self-assurance and authority. People who communicate a lot with their hands may also tend to be more physically touchy in conversation. Handshakes. The way a person shakes another's hand can express a person's views. A firm handshake with a palm on top of another person's is generally a sign of high self-assurance and dominance, whereas a weak handshake could signify insecurity or a tendency to be submissive. Positioning. Very confident and authoritarian people will tend to place themselves at the front of a group, whereas more passive or insecure people will try to stay in the background. Crossed limbs. Crossing one's arms or legs can have a variety of meanings, but most generally it is taken as a negative sign. Crossed arms or legs can signify insecurity, defensiveness, resentment, anger, or disagreement. Although this is true, it is also important to remember not to always assume that crossing the limbs automatically holds a negative connotation, as it could simply be that the person finds it more comfortable to sit or stand that way. Hints of sexual interest. It is common for men who hold a sexual interest for another person to face his chest toward the other person and lean forward, whereas women tend to turn their chests away from the other person and lean back, with their feet facing the other person. Fidgeting. Restless legs or feet, or any expression of struggling to remain still, are generally signs of nervousness, anticipation, or eagerness. Fidgeting can also be a sign of boredom, so the context and means of restlessness need to be considered. Similarly to some of the previously mentioned actions, fidgeting is one of those that really needs to be taken with a grain of salt, since many people do repetitive, small motions or have tics that they do out of habit, often without even noticing it. Because of this, it is important to observe these fidgeting motions throughout numerous separate meetings with the person that you are analyzing. Considering all of the above physical movements and their various interpretations, there are a select few that generally always provide consistent readings. The following three in particular are great to begin your analyses of people and work your way to totally understanding the full scope of body language. Crossed limbs. As previously stated, this stance most generally expresses uneasiness or apprehension of a person or situation. This is a kind of instinctual protection, as the person is physically guarding themselves from whatever is making them uncomfortable. Mirroring. If a person is replicating another person's motions and stance, this expresses interest and a sense of connection which they want to make known to the other person. Mirroring is commonly seen in mediators and business negotiators, as well as in people who are romantically interested in each other. Carriage. The way a person carries themselves and holds their posture can be very informative about them. If a person has a tendency to stand and sit straight up, with their chest out and their head held high, that is very indicative of a confident and authoritative person, whereas a slumped, limp posture often radiates insecurity or diffidence. The different sections of the body send different messages, with each group generally relaying a certain message. Although this is true, it is important to always keep in mind that every person is different, and their body language coincides with that. Extroverted people may make more grandiose gestures or make themselves more visible in a group, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their introvert counterparts are completely insecure and always anxious. Although fidgeting is often a telltale sign of awkwardness or nervousness in a person, many people simply fidget or do small repetitive movements out of habit. This is why it is important to analyze a specific person's behavior over an extended period of time after a few meetings in different scenarios to properly gauge their body language and avoid incorrect analyses. What your upper body is communicating: the trunk of our body contains all of our vital organs, and our bodies instinctually perform movements to protect our heart, lungs, and other organs in reaction to our environment. For example, if you ask a stranger on the street for directions but they do not turn their torso towards you when replying, then they most likely feel uncertain about you. Conversely, if you come across someone you know on the street and say hello, they will most likely greet you with their torso facing you as a sign of trust and assurance. The height at which one holds themselves from their upper body is also significant. A straight torso with upright shoulders gives off an air of confidence, whereas a slouched posture with slumped shoulders indicates boredom or self-doubt. Upper body analysis is especially useful in dating scenarios. If the other person keeps their torso pointed towards you, this indicates that they feel safe around you. If they bring themselves even closer to you, this certainly indicates comfort, as from a primal standpoint, they are exposing the carriage of their vital organs directly to you. Conversely, if you find the other person on a date to be sitting at a distance from you, with their torso angled away, or with crossed arms, this signifies a feeling of not being entirely secure and keeping their torsos protected. This upper body analysis can be applied in a variety of social situations not limited to dating, but this type of scenario is a very good example. What the arms and hands are telling you. The arms and hands can communicate a great deal about a person. Some people use excessive amounts of hand and arms gestures, while others hardly use any at all. Generally speaking, when someone uses a lot of hand motions when speaking, they are perceived as more approachable and spirited. Opposite to high-energy gestures, more understated gestures such as crossing the arms are generally associated with being standoffish, antisocial, scared, or upset. As with all body language components, however, the context also needs to be considered when making judgments based on these analyses. It is common for some people to cross their arms or do other low-energy hand and arm gestures when in unfamiliar situations, which may provide an inaccurate depiction of them. In order to correctly interpret their movements, it is important to combine arm and hand gesture analysis with observation of their other actions as well. Also important to keep in mind is people who are restless and fiddle with their hands and arms. Fidgeting is most generally a sign of anxiety and discomfort, and commonly manifests in people touching their own faces, heads, and other body parts. Aside from this, fiddling with one's hands and arms can also indicate boredom, such as with tapping the fingers. It is a universal thing to nonverbally communicate with our hands and arms, and a lot of the time it is done unconsciously and actually discloses more than we would prefer to let on about how we are feeling. Luckily, it is possible to train oneself to be able to better conceal certain emotions or thoughts by controlling one's hand and arm movements. A good example of this is the news anchors that you see on television. In order to hide nervousness or anxiety that usually manifests through fidgeting or shaking, keep your hands folded on a table or in your lap to keep them still. It is important not to clench them tightly together, as this can communicate the same emotions as fidgeting, but just to let them rest calmly on each other. If you are in a standing position, you can let your arms fall naturally at your sides. It is generally more difficult to find a comfortable position that feels natural when you are consciously thinking about it, so when you see someone who has mastered it, you can be sure that they have put a lot of practice into it. Although in most situations there won't be a lot of touching involved upon first meeting someone, it is common in many cultures to greet people for the first time with a handshake. Handshakes have come to be associated with the confidence of a person or lack thereof, but this is not necessarily accurate. It is commonly believed that strong, firm handshakes are a sign of self-assurance, and that weak handshakes are a sign of just that, weakness. Because of this, a lot of people tend to overdo the firm handshake because of the meaning associated with it. Additionally, handshakes are not a universal social greeting around the world, so if you greet a person from a culture that isn't accustomed to using handshakes, they may have a less strong one, which doesn't necessarily mean that they are insecure. In short, it is not the most accurate tactic of gathering information about a person based on the strength of their handshake. What the legs and feet are saying. Probably because they are not usually directly in sight, the legs and feet are often disregarded when it comes to reading a person's body language. However, there has been research that shows that the legs can be one of the most honestly expressive parts of our bodies. Because people put a lot of effort into controlling their facial expressions and the movements of their arms and hands, the legs and feet can often reveal things that people have trained their faces and other body parts to hide. When analyzing someone's body language, observe their feet and where they are pointed. That they most want to be, so if they are pointed towards you, this is a sign of comfort and security. However, if they are pointed away, this is another organic method of protection to be able to readily flee if a person is feeling uncomfortable. Besides the direction that their feet are pointing in, fidgety legs and feet can also indicate insecurity or discomfort, similarly to fidgety arms and hands. Also alike, repetitive foot and leg motions can signify anxiety or boredom. The difference is that from a biological standpoint, keeping the feet and legs in motion better enables the person to get up and run if need be. Observing a person's foot and leg moving habits can give you a lot of insight to their concentration capacity. Also similar to how crossing the arms signifies a person protecting themselves, crossing the legs can do the same. Women tend to cross their legs or hold their legs close together when wearing dresses or skirts, but this doesn't always have to mean that the scenario is making them feel insecure. On the other side, men tend to do the opposite and actually spread their legs excessively widely while sitting down. This takes up a lot of space, and these types of moves most generally indicate a feeling of authority or overconfidence. When someone partakes in one of these space-claiming moves such as spreading the legs very far apart while seated, it can be assumed that they are trying to express confidence or superiority, whether they realize it or not. The way a person carries themselves while walking is also a great indicator of their inner workings. A person who walks in wide strides in a confident manner exhibits poise and ability, and dragging feet with a slouched posture while walking can indicate a lack of confidence. To what extent can we control or fake our body language? It has been said that if you know how to properly alter and control your body language to seem more self-assured, that it will actually sink in and cause you to become more confident. One study in particular was done by Amy Cuddy to test this theory. The subjects partook in high-power and low-power poses and the variances were observed. High-power poses include those that take up space, like leaning back in a chair with your hands folded behind your neck and your feet propped up, or standing with your hands on your hips. Low-power poses. The results showed that when the people were executing the high-power positions, their testosterone levels were raised and their stress hormones cortisol were decreased, and the exact opposite occurred when doing the low-power positions. The conclusive result was that you can actually alter the chemical and hormone levels in your body by consciously taking part in a pose, regardless of whether or not that really reflects what you were actually thinking at the time. As an AP, you can refer back to this when observing people in the future. If you have thoughts that the person actually inherently lacks confidence but are compensating with high-power poses, those positions can actually be providing them with the confidence that they are otherwise missing. Aspects of the face with all the muscles in the face and its ability to display thoughts and emotions, reading facial expressions can be a difficult task. However, there are a few basic principles of facial movements that can be used to determine simple emotions. Positivity or happiness. In Western cultures, a smile is generally accepted as a sign of happiness, but it is only genuine happiness if the muscles around the eyes are engaged in the expression. This will be evident by the crow's feet or wrinkles near the corners of the eyes. Another sign of muscle engagement is the eyes becoming more horizontally narrow as the cheek muscles rise and the smile widens. Without these notable characteristics of a smile, an ingenuine smile may come across as sarcasm or general courtesy, but not true joyousness. In Eastern cultures, a smile may be interpreted as a sign of agreement and not necessarily a sign of happiness. Negativity or sadness. The signs of sadness are visible on the eyes and mouth. The inner points of the eyebrows will be drawn inward and upward. The corners of the mouth may be pointed downward, as well as the bottom lip slightly protruding with both lips pressed together. Research points out that sadness is the hardest expression to fake. Hate or contempt. The expression of hate or contempt can be marked by a look also referred to as a sneer, in which the mouth resembles a half smile but one corner of the mouth is drawn up higher than the other. The eyes may be narrowed with the eyebrows drawn toward one another and the cheek muscles protruding as they are raised. Distaste or disgust. The cheeks will be raised and lip curled, exposing clenched teeth. Shock or surprise. The eyes will be opened wide, which causes the eyebrows to raise significantly. The bottom jaw may also drop open slightly or widely. Fear. Fear will cause the eyebrows to raise and wrinkle and the bottom eyelids will be drawn upward. Sometimes, the upper eyelids will also rise, exposing whites in the eyes above the irises. The lips may also be slightly parted. Anger. The eyes will be narrowed with the eyebrows drawn inwards and down. The lips may be pressed together if the person is not speaking, also clenching the jaw muscles and the lower jaw slightly protruding. If the person is speaking, the tone of voice will likely be raised. Obvious and subtle expressions. Macro-obvious expressions manifest when a person is around others with whom they're comfortable or when they are in a situation in which they don't need to censor their emotions. These expressions will last for half a second to 5 seconds. Micro-subtle expressions last for fractions of seconds, making them difficult to recognize. They usually only appear when someone is attempting to hide their true emotions in a situation. The person is also generally unaware they are making micro-expressions, so it is a good way to determine a person's true emotions when they are not openly expressing their feelings. When learning skills to become an AP, the face will be a big focus of attention. The many muscles of the face around the eyes and eyebrows and the mouth can divulge the secrets of a person's intentions and emotions. Before exploring specific facial expressions, we will learn the concept of universal expressions of the face. Are there expressions that are evident around the world throughout the many cultures that exist? Is it necessary to reevaluate what you understand about facial expressions when you cross borders? The answer may lie in the discoveries of Charles Darwin. Inborn expressions. Charles Darwin published The Expressions of the Emotions of Man and Animals in 1872 and explained that every human on Earth can only share 6 basic expressions because of their genes. These expressions are happiness and causing unrest for decades among scientists who argued its validity. In the 1960s, facial expression expert and psychiatrist Paul Ekman decided to put the theory to test. Ekman, along with his partners, traveled all over the world into parts untouched by Western influence. He discovered that, although having been secluded from much of the world, people were able to display and recognize the same facial expressions as people from most other parts of the world. His conclusion was that no matter where or how a person was raised, every person shares an understanding of the 6 basic facial expressions. Ekman also added a seventh expression: contempt. Scientists around the world since Ekman's work have challenged his findings, stating that it is not solely a result of genetic influence, but that it is a combination of genetics and culture. While there are variations among different cultures, the prominent seven remain strong. A human's ability to recognize a facial expression happens almost subconsciously, to the point that our brains find human-like faces in non-human objects, projecting human emotion on emotionless objects. The seven main emotions manifest mainly within the eyes and the mouth. Eyebrows. The eyebrows are one of the most expressive features of a human face. Even for someone who is generally adept at hiding their emotions, the eyebrows will almost always give them away. Lowered eyebrows are intended to hide the eyes, thereby hiding emotion. People with naturally frowny faces are regarded as sneaky or unfriendly. Humans are naturally drawn to others with open expressions, so a face that appears frowny can make someone suspicious or uneasy. However, it is not wise to assume that someone with lowered eyebrows is unfriendly. Sometimes in deep concentration a person may unconsciously lower their eyebrows. Other times it may be an expression of annoyance or anger. Having a scrunched nose with lowered eyebrows is a sign of disgust. Conversely, raised eyebrows can demonstrate fear, worry, or surprise, and the difference in these emotions can be obvious. Raised eyebrows that are slightly curved may show signs of fear, while raised eyebrows in an arch shape will indicate surprise. There will be It has been said that the eyes are the windows to the soul, and most people can determine another's emotion by looking into their eyes. We are so programmed to read the eyes of others that we can tell when someone is looking at us from up to 100 feet away. We can also differentiate between someone blankly staring at us or if they are directly looking at us. Some people are better at decoding eye and eyebrow interactions than others, so becoming a good AP will require the ability to learn what movements are associated with what emotions. We generally view the inability of someone to hold eye contact with another as a sign of lying because they don't want their face to reveal the truth. However, well-seasoned liars will hold eye contact aggressively in a way that implies they are challenging you to call them out on the lie. If the direct and aggressive eye contact makes you uncomfortable, there's a good chance they are manipulating the truth. Other times aggressive eye contact can mean a lack of social skills, and the person with the unending gaze may not realize they are making you uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed someone who laughs or smiles and their eyes seem to show no expression? It can be a little creepy and cause you to feel suspicious about their genuine feelings about the situation. A genuine smile will cause the muscles in the corners of the eyes to contract, causing wrinkles or laugh lines. If you are aware of laugh lines when trying to make a good impression on someone, rest assured you are coming across as genuine. Mouth. The mouth has many muscles which cause a variety of movements that relate to emotions. The movement of the lips can give away many subtle expressions. This is an advantage when it comes to being an AP because the mouth is also very hard to control and might reveal feelings that someone might be trying to hide. We've previously mentioned that a fake smile is evident by movement of only the mouth, with no movement of the cheeks or eyes. A person who is smiling to be courteous or when they don't really want to smile will only raise the corners of their mouth while the rest of their face is generally unaffected. A mouth that is turned downward may imply sadness, but some people have naturally downturned lips and always appear to be sad. Teeth was a sign of hatred or hostility. Almost every other species of animal will bare its teeth to display anger, not happiness. Tightly clenching one's teeth is another expression to watch for. This usually indicates a level of unrest or being uncomfortable with the situation, and they may be unsure of what to say. This face is evident when someone is caught in a lie or when revealing an awkward truth. Sometimes anger can cause a person to purse their lips as if they are trying to keep the words from exploding out of their mouth. Clenching the lips may be a way of keeping quiet while they work out the wording of how they want to say something. Biting the lips can also be a sign of contemplative thought or an attempt to stay quiet. Jaw clenching reveals discomfort as well. An AP can infer that someone who clenches or grinds their teeth might suffer from anxiety, or they might be distracted and they are unaware they are doing it. Conversely, puckered lips can indicate openness or desire. If someone is puckering their lips while talking to someone, chances are that they are sexually attracted to the other person. When the lips are not drawn in any direction or shape, generally the person is comfortable and relaxed. Conclusion: you might feel that you've ingested a lot of information about reading a person's face and the many variations that expressions can reveal about emotion. On the positive side, the eyebrows and eyes tend to work in tandem, so recognizing one movement will inform the other. Fear, surprise, and worry are notably driven by the eyebrows raising and the eyes widening. The subtle differences, such as a curve in the eyebrow, will delineate fear. Lowered eyebrows tend to reveal a person as annoyed, angry, or deep in thought. The eyes themselves have the ability to reveal other emotions. In Western cultures, steady eye contact can display confidence, but if taken too far can show aggression. In other cultures, however, steady eye contact is considered rude, so it is wise to be mindful of cultural backgrounds and customs. Sometimes a person will avoid eye contact when they are lying, while some may try to distract the person they're lying to by holding eye contact too firmly in an attempt to compensate. Because the eyes can be very revealing, it is important as an AP to pay close attention to the eyes and the expression they emote when analyzing a person. To determine if someone is displaying a genuine smile, the eyes and the will be involved. Laugh lines in the corners of the eyes will be evident, whereas a fake smile will only involve the mouth. The mouth can also display other emotions. Downturned lips might mean sadness, one corner of the mouth lifted as contempt, pursed lips display anger or discomfort, and puckered lips show desire. When combining all aspects of a person's facial expression, you get a complete view of their emotional state at any moment and, depending on when those expressions manifest, can reveal a lot about a person in general. While there are differences among countries or regions of the world, there are generally accepted expressions of some emotions across different cultures, perhaps more reliable than body language. There are also micro-expressions that will be covered in depth elsewhere in this book. For now, rest assured that being able to reliably read a person's face is a critical skill to becoming an AP. Review: here are 3 scenarios of expression through body language. Try to understand what is being expressed, then compare your answers to the ones listed below. Example 1. This person sits far away from others with slumped shoulders and arms crossed. Legs are crossed with one foot twitching. Eyebrows are drawn together and lips pressed tightly together. Example 2. This person makes gestures as they speak at a volume that can be clearly heard by everyone they are addressing. They sit upright with their shoulders drawn back. Sometimes they will lightly touch the person next to them as they are talking. Eyebrows are relaxed and they maintain eye contact with the person they are speaking to. They smile when it is appropriate to do so, and their smile affects their entire face and narrows their eyes. Example 3. This person maintains consistent eye contact as they stand with their feet apart, arms crossed as they are speaking. They occasionally smile, but it doesn't engage their eyes. They may show a micro-expression intermittently in which the eyebrows pull upward, creating wrinkles between them, their eyes widen, and their lips press together. They maintain a considerable distance between themselves and others. Answers: Example 1. This person likely feels insecure or anxious, or is uncomfortable with the people around them. They are not open to being approached by others, and probably lacks self-confidence. Example 2. This person is comfortable in their own skin and doesn't fear judgment from others. They don't feel the need to exert dominance, but rather, they exude a natural high status. Their confidence allows them to connect with others. Example 3. This is an example of someone who is attempting to hide their true feelings by making it appear as if they are feeling a different way. They are attempting to project dominance and confidence, when in fact they are feeling annoyed, nervous, or fearful. They overcompensate these feelings. Chapter 3. Outward Personality Characterization Aspects. This chapter will explore 5 facets of a person's lifestyle that will help you to better understand aspects of their personality. 1. Looking at someone's habits and tastes to understand them. 2. How someone's appearance and clothing are used as a form of expression. 3. Analyzing how a person uses language. 4. Correlations between taste in music and personality traits. 5. Examining a person's peer group to understand them. There are many aspects of a person's personality that you don't know when you first meet them. However, there are aspects about them that they project whether they know it or not, such as their clothing choice or personal hygiene. By analyzing their belongings, clothing, use of language, and overall appearance, you can gain an insight into who they are. You may also learn about them through the people they choose to interact with, observing their habits and taking note of their tastes in entertainment or social activities. Analyzing versus judging. When you use external factors to evaluate someone, it is important that you take an objective perspective and use caution not to judge a person. What you see on the outside are mere indications about their internal qualities. You should use what you can see as pieces of the whole puzzle of who they are. For instance, many celebrities portray themselves one way to further their careers in the spotlight. In their personal lives, however, this may not be an accurate portrait of how they act behind closed doors, so to speak. They only portray themselves in a certain manner to benefit their work life. What you see important indicators about a person will leak out via their outward appearance. Their hairstyles, the clothes they wear, the choice to wear a certain perfume or cologne, or other personal grooming habits can be used to gain perspective about a person. Many people use these methods of personal style to express themselves. Keep in mind, though, they may be dressing a certain way to create an appearance or impression that may not be aligned with their true internal self. Take the example of a young female headed to mostly male population. She may choose to wear a dark-colored pantsuit and a blouse just low-cut enough to show a bit of cleavage. She may truly feel intimidated, but she wants to project that she is confident. Some studies suggest that women who choose to hide their feminine assets, i.e. breasts or hips, are subconsciously expressing an insecurity in their femininity. On the other hand, women who are unafraid to show a little cleavage or wear tight-fitting clothing are expressing the fact that they don't feel undermined by their gender. This is one example that demonstrates how difficult it can be to determine personality traits about a person based solely on their attire. Other grooming habits may give a clearer and perhaps more accurate view of their internal aspects. For the most part, someone who has taken the time to appear clean and presentable and who wears appropriate fitting clothing demonstrates a certain level of self-confidence. The other side of that is when someone appears unkempt with unwashed hair and wears baggy or raggedy clothes, probably has low self-esteem or lacks social awareness. Because these types of observations are only visible, there are many other cues about a person to consider in conjunction with their appearance. For instance, body language or verbal communication. From the previous example of the well-groomed, well-dressed person, it may be that they are highly insecure and they have spent much time and effort in creating their ideal appearance. Conversely, the person who appears to be messy or unkempt may have high self-confidence but rejects the notion of accepting social cues about expectations and believe their appearance is not who they is as a person. Yet another possibility exists. If a person appears unkempt but displays other aspects of having high self-esteem, it is possible that they ran out of the house in a hurry, or that appearing this way is an ironic form of fashion-focused self-expression. What you hear how a person's voice projects can also be indicative of their internal personality. If a person speaks in a medium volume with rhythmic or steady intonation and the words seem to fall out of their mouth with ease, chances are that they are comfortable and confident. If someone stutters through their words and their voice is shaky, this may demonstrate their lack of belief in what they're telling you or that they are uncomfortable. Sometimes if a person is speaking very rapidly, it may show signs of attention to the words leaving their mouth. You may also be able to draw conclusions about a person based on how much they say or their amount of participation in a conversation. Some people spend a lot of time talking and very little time listening or allowing others to speak. This can indicate one of two traits. The person is overconfident and believes whatever they are saying is the most important, or it manifests as an expression of insecurity that makes them feel they need to overcompensate for their lack of internal prowess. Interestingly, some studies have concluded that people who talk more and tend to have extroversive characteristics appear to others to be more intelligent than they actually are. That only lasts until they make a remark that is absurd or makes no sense at all. Someone that allows others time to speak generally show consideration for others. Although again, it shouldn't be assumed that their outward projections are direct reflections of their internal thought processes. You must also consider their body language and eye movements, as well as other factors, when paying attention to their verbal interaction with others. What they listen to. There is a multitude of studies that have been conducted about a person's musical preference in relation to their personality. As you may have noticed by now, there is no one-size-fits-all rule when it comes to determining characteristics of someone's personality. Below is a summary of a study conducted at Heriot-Watt University of 36,000 participants from all over the world. Rap hip-hop correlates with being outgoing and having high self-esteem. Despite stereotypes, there seem to be no links to aggression or violence. Rock heavy metal. Another category that defied stereotypes, there seems to be no connection to violence or aggression with this musical preference. Listeners tend to be creative, introverted, gentle, and have low self-esteem. Indie connections to creativity and intellect. Also, linked to low self-esteem, passivity, and anxiety. Pop fans of this genre tend to be honest, conventional, and extroverted. With classical, although listeners tend to be introverted, they have high self-esteem and are emotionally stable and comfortable in their own skin. Dance connected with outgoing and assertive personalities. Jazz blues fans have high self-esteem and are extroverted, intelligent, and creative. Habitual behaviors. Sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. Stephen R. Covey. A person's habits will also reveal a great deal about their personality. Volunteering may indicate that they are empathetic and generous. Having pets could show they enjoy caring for others or that they don't interact well with people or they are lonely. If they are heavily influenced by following a strict schedule, it could be an indicator of the desire to maintain control and may be caused by a lack of self-assurance. If someone prefers to spend most of their time socializing and prefers not to be alone, they may feel the desire to self-validate. Someone who spends very little time with others may lack self-confidence or feel uncomfortable in the presence of others. Also, consider the kinds of entertainment a person finds enjoyable. Television shows, video games, websites, articles or books, blogs, or movies. Consider the end result of the consumption of these sources of entertainment or how they might influence a person who regularly consumes media from various sources. The way a person views outcomes of their choices, whether positive or negative, can give insight into their perspectives. Now combine their media consumption choices with their disposition. Check out their Twitter or Facebook, who they follow, what they post, who their friends are, etc. Many times, people will mirror their internal sentiments on an outward platform, especially if they spend an excessive amount of unconstructive time on these social media sites. Maybe they are more comfortable with the illusion of anonymity these sites provide and are uncomfortable in face-to-face interactions because of low self-confidence. Perhaps the reassurance of constant interaction. Every little piece of information can be used to gather a whole image of a person. Any of these aspects can be considered a habit if they expose themselves to it on a regular basis. Participation in these activities can influence and form the thought processes a person may knowingly or unknowingly construct. Who they interact with. Perhaps one of the most definitive factors of a person's internal characteristic is who they choose to associate with, influencing how they view themselves. Just to reiterate, this is not an exact science. You would have to analyze each person in their social circle to draw more solid conclusions. However, a person's friends will be yet more pieces of the puzzle of a person. A peer group can influence how a person makes decisions for themselves, as well as influence how others make their own decisions. Consider a group of friends who regularly party and binge drink on the weekends. It is highly unlikely you will find someone in that group who is concerned with their health. Studies have shown that how a person chooses their social circles is a highly complex interaction of many variables. There does seem to be four main contributing factors. 1. Convenience. How often people interact and physical proximity can be very influencing when associating with a group. It's easier to be friends with someone just a few minutes up the road than someone who lives several hours away. It's also easier to form a social bond with someone you see on a daily basis rather than every few weeks. 2. Reciprocal altruism. This consideration lies in what two people or a group can do for one another and how often it is reciprocated. It can be as simple as offering companionship or a friendship based on person 1 offering a higher social status association to person 2, while person 2 offers kindness and generosity. It usually isn't this basic, but understanding reciprocated altruism can determine what a person feels they lack and how they seek out those traits in others. 3. Similarities. Generally, people become friends because of similar innate and existing characteristics, despite the fact they may have many other differences. There will always need to be a common ground on which two people begin to interact and can establish a positive relationship. 4. Reinforcing world. For example, friends may share certain morals or values or mindsets, and will often befriend someone who confirms their self-evaluation of their value as a person. This may be a subconscious attraction. People who are confident will seek those who support their confidence. Conversely, someone who lacks self-value may be drawn to others who reinforce their lack of value. For instance, this is evident among women who are victims of domestic violence. They will continue to endure repeated abuse, feeling unable to leave the relationship because they have perhaps subconsciously validated their lack of self-worth and believe they deserve terrible treatment. Proximity. When analyzing someone, the closer they are to a person they are in a relationship with can tell you about that person. Consider Joe, Susie, and Brian. If Joe and Susie are close friends, you can learn a lot about Joe from Susie. However, if Brian is Joe's distant cousin whom Joe only sees every few years, Brian will offer little in the way of understanding Joe. This not only applies to the amount of contact between two people, but also a matter of influence. Joe may be highly influenced by Susie, but it also amounts to the strength of Susie's influence on Joe. Chapter 4. Understanding verbal communication. We've already talked about the non-verbal ways that people communicate, but we can also learn a lot from their verbal communications and how they talk. However, this doesn't mean that they need to tell you their deep dark secrets. You can learn a lot about a person just by listening to their speed, rhythm, and tone. Part of being an AP is recognizing that you have to overcome certain biases when you listen to somebody, because these can get between you and the truth. Now we're going to talk about misconceptions you might develop about somebody based solely on their voice. We're also going to learn about how word choice can tell you about some aspects of an individual's personality. You need to know this as an AP so that you can look beyond your first impressions. Pitch. The pitch of a person's voice can determine what others think of them. People generally believe men with higher pitched voices and women with lower pitches. People are more easily calmed by lower voices, and they're more relaxing to listen to. This why places such as emergency call centers, hospitals, and customer service locations prefer to hire individuals who have nice low voices. This might be a sexist issue. People associate lower voices with testosterone, a hormone found in men. This puts women at a disadvantage because their voices are naturally higher, which makes it more difficult for them to be taken seriously. Many struggle to make their voices sound lower, which will make them seem more powerful in the business world. Also, high pitches are associated with children, which can make it difficult for high-pitched people to be taken seriously. As an AP, you need to be aware of this so that you can give everyone the consideration and attention they deserve. Don't let a high-pitched voice mix you up. People can control the pitch of their voice from 4 different places: the nose, the mouth, the chest, and the diaphragm. When people speak from their nose, they sound high-pitched and whiny. When people speak from their mouth, it is less nasally, but it is still not the best. A mouth speaker likely feels unseen or unappreciated, and even though they try to be heard, nobody listens. Most people speak from their chest, and this makes sure that they are heard. However, it can be tiring, and sooner or later the speaker will become hoarse. The best way to talk is from the diaphragm. It is strong, full, and generally requires training to be effective. Diaphragm speakers have likely put time and effort into it, and they are probably successful and used to their speeches and comments being heard. Speech patterns: the way someone speaks is referred to as their speech pattern. This can refer to the speed of the speech and any pauses they take. It's possible that how quickly somebody talks has a bigger impression on somebody than their tone. This is because tone can only be partially controlled, but speaking patterns can be changed entirely if the speaker wishes. First, let's discuss fast talkers. Speaking too quickly can make you seem rushed and anxious. It makes you look like you're just saying whatever comes to mind without bothering to think about it first, and it can make the listener nervous. As an AP, you need to notice these fast talkers. If they always speak quickly, they're probably always anxious. If they slow down during times when the situation is calmer and there aren't as many people around, their anxiety might stem from crowded situations and stressful social environments. Slow talkers, on the other hand, tend to seem more authoritative, friendly, and calm. They're clearly taking their time to think about what they're going to say. However, this can be tricky. If you speak too slowly, you might appear tired or distracted, and your listener might get bored. As an AP, you need to notice these very slow talkers. They might need more time than most because it takes them time to put their thoughts together. If they pause often, this is probably the case. Fillers and pronouns: besides the speed of their speech, a person's choice of words can also be helpful when it comes to analyzing them. It may sound difficult to try and see the meaning of every single word, but there are a few specific parts you can focus on instead. For example, fillers and pronouns. Fillers are words that break up normal speech and don't add any meaning to it. For example, there's a, like, and more. They've gotten a bad reputation recently, and many individuals giving speeches or individuals in positions of power have been trying to get rid of. For example, if somebody uses a lot, it might look like they are anxious or insecure. In reality, research has shown that they're just collecting their thoughts. They're remembering something, searching for the right word, or correcting a statement they've already made. Like is used the same way, although it is often viewed negatively and associated with Valley Girls and people with lower intelligence. The filler a person chooses depends on their age, gender, and region. For example, women tend to say and older people tend to say Pronouns include we, I, and you. As an AP, you need to be aware of the fact that a pronoun can offer insights into an individual. Research has shown that when people are talking to somebody in a position of power or somebody who they feel intimidated by, they use I. This is because they are feeling self-conscious and think they need to assert themselves. Somebody who uses I constantly and is always bringing the conversation back to themselves probably feels insecure. They are intimidated by everybody, and this strange combination of insecurity and arrogance is definitely something that an AP should notice. The pronoun you, in other words like that, yourself, your, aren't always positive. They tend to be used more in arguments, when people are putting blame on each other. However, you words can also be positive, and knowing which way it goes requires an understanding of the context of the situation. Let's consider we. This pronoun can tell you about how somebody is doing in their romantic relationships. If couples generally use we rather than singular pronouns such as I, they see themselves as partners and they are in sync. The same can go for groups. When people feel like they belong, they use we. Research also shows us that a traumatic event can lead groups of people to use we more. For example, Americans after 9/11, when patriotism was high. The significance of swears historically: swearing was seen as vulgar, a sign of a lack of education. The media portrayed these people as inferior, and people were judged harshly if they used obscenities. More recently, however, curses are being looked at in terms of personality analysis. Current research indicates that people who swear more are seen as being more trustworthy, extroverted, and persuasive than others. It shows fearlessness, honesty when it comes to expressing intense emotions, and a lack of concern about what others might think. Summary: overall, it is important as an AP to remember that how a person speaks can tell a lot about them. True, their tone might not reflect their personality, but you can still draw some conclusions about how others see them. Keep in mind that whether or not they have taken the time to train their pitch is also important. The speed of speech is essential as well, as it can give insights into whether they are a more thoughtful or more anxious person. Finally, we covered the significance of certain words, such as fillers, pronouns, and swear words. As an AP, you can't assume that fillers are negative, or that somebody who uses I often is self-centered. You can be positive or negative depending on the context, but we is nearly always positive. Chapter 5. The 6 Basic Human Needs. This chapter covers the 6 basic human needs, how the ordering of those needs impacts a person's behavior, the ways each of us control our needs, and how behaviors can become addictive. The 6 basic human needs. Before we can analyze somebody's behavior, we need to understand what their needs are, which can also be phrased as what their goals in life are. Food, water, shelter, and other necessities are included here, and the things that people need to be happy can be split into 6 categories. The first 4 are primal needs, which are necessary for survival. The last 2 are spiritual needs, which are necessary for fulfillment and involve something greater than the self. Humans need all of the following to be met in the right amounts and with the right method. If people are receiving something that feels necessary for their survival, they may end up pursuing goals that don't necessarily help themselves or others. The 4 primal needs. 1. Certainty. Every person needs a level of certainty in their lives. How much they need depends on the person, but generally it requires the ability to avoid pain and stress and find comfort. Overall, people need some amount of control over the world around them. People who have an overdeveloped need for certainty can sometimes become what we call control freaks, or people who are obsessed with eliminating all uncertainty and controlling everything about their surroundings. Generally, this need is easy to meet. Speaking in primal terms, people just need food, water, and somewhere safe to come home to every night. Sometimes meeting this need is as simple as watching a movie you enjoyed when you were younger. 2. Uncertainty. Given the need for certainty, this may seem strange. However, without some uncertainty, life becomes monotonous, with little variety or change. All people need some stimuli in order to stay engaged, and all people want some variety in their lives. However, the amount of variety is different from person to person. Trying a new food or movie or running route every week. On the other hand, some individuals need the excitement that comes from seeing new places and meeting new people. The need for uncertainty can grow to the point where people show a lack of commitment, and the need for basic physiological things such as food and shelter can go neglected. 3. Significance. Everybody needs to feel significant somehow, because it helps them feel important, unique, valued, and special. This is tied closely into the feedback we get from the rest of the world. It can validate our existence. It comes in a variety of forms. A mother might feel significant when she cares for her baby. A coworker might feel significant when you go out of your way to thank them, and a murderer might feel significant when they hold a gun to their victim's head. This need is the most complex out of all of them, and characteristics such as attention-seeking, self-righteousness, competitiveness, and insecurity can all arise thanks to this. 4. Love and connection. Everybody needs some form of love and connection in their lives, but it doesn't necessarily have to come from a significant other. People can be emotionally intimate with a community, a friend, or a family member as well. This need is connected to compassion and empathy, which are both very important when it comes to maintaining relationships with others. If this need becomes excessive, it can lead to an over-dependence on others. If this need is not strong enough, people can become isolated, which can create issues with accountability or conscience in the way they act. The two spiritual needs. 1. Growth. The need for growth runs alongside the need for uncertainty. Because both deal with change. Uncertainty doesn't lead in any particular direction, it is a simple change in circumstances. Growth is very different. This is a person's deliberate progress towards an ideal, a goal, or an outcome. Material growth encompasses activities such as improving your physical state or circumstance or working on a project. For example, maybe you take on a home improvement project or work towards a promotion. It can also come in the form of personal development, which is generally internal and can include gaining a better understanding of yourself or learning to be more generous. Overall, growth can apply to every area of your life, and it will have a huge impact on the people who you are closest to. 2. Contribution. In order for people to feel truly fulfilled, they need to feel as though they've impacted a cause which goes beyond just themselves. This comes from our basic characteristic of being highly social animals. We used to survive in groups, but in our modern society that instinct has turned into the need to give back and help others or to serve some cause greater than ourselves. How are the needs prioritized? Different people prioritize their needs in different ways, and understanding why they choose some over others will help us gain a deeper understanding of who they are. The way people meet their needs is also important when it comes to analyzing somebody's behavior. Exercise. If you had to order your needs from most important to least important, what would your list look like? What does this indicate about your priorities in life, and how has that impacted your past actions and choices? Think about a close friend or family member. How do you think they rank their needs? How do they fulfill these needs? We all do it differently, so take a moment to look back at your own list. Next to each need, list 3 negative and 3 positive ways that you fulfill it. Next, do the same for the close friend or family member. Next, take a look at how you've behaved in a recent situation, and consider your typical acts and responses. Can you explain it by looking at how you prioritize and fulfill your needs? Try doing the same for the other person. Keep in mind that the way we view and list our needs can change as we go through life. Worked example. It's easier to internalize a theory with a worked example. In the real world you would encounter a person and their behavior and then work backwards in order to analyze their actions and figure out what needs motivated them. Let's get started with some brief background about our example scenario. Bobby and Sally are 4 years into a relationship together. Lisa's mother, who lives in a different state, has become seriously. Action. Sally wants to move to be closer to her mother. Bobby tries to convince her to stay, and when she decides to leave, he gets angry and leaves the house. Analysis. Sally values love and connection over all else, and is willing to leave certainty and growth behind to go take care of her mother. Bobby values significance and certainty, and since Lisa isn't meeting that need, he storms out in anger. Scenario 2. Action. Sally doesn't move, and she keeps her current job. Bobby thinks they should move closer to her mother, and they argue. Analysis. Sally values growth and certainty above all else, and decides to stay put and focus on her job so she can progress there. Bobby values love and connection, so he thinks they should move closer to her mother. However, these scenarios are extremely simplified. In reality, there would be a complex and subtle contribution from needs, actions, thoughts, and emotions. However, by constantly looking at people's needs and figuring out why they do what they do, we can get a better understanding of the human processes and improve our ability to analyze other people as well as ourselves. Stranger or friend. This method can come in handy in a variety of scenarios, but it is most useful when you are familiar with the way someone behaves. However, you can still use it with people you aren't acquainted with. All it takes is some simple observations of how a person behaves in a couple of different scenarios to figure out what their most valued needs are and how they fulfill them. When people use negative methods, you might be reading this book to try and understand the irrational and potentially harmful behavior of somebody you know. For example, think back to our previous example of a criminal who feels significant when they threaten and terrify their victim. People will do anything to fulfill their needs, and if they can't or simply don't want to do it through positive methods, they will turn to negative ones. For example, if you were dying of thirst, you would drink any water you could find, even if it was dirty and might make you sick. A child who does not receive enough attention and is lacking in significance might act out to get some self-validation, despite the fact that it will be negative. We'll talk more about this later when we discuss the stroke economy. What is a needs addiction? Our desire to fulfill our needs is so intense that when we find a behavior that works for us, we might become addicted to it. Generally, if a behavior fulfills 3 or more needs over and over again, we will keep seeking it out, and sometimes become addicted to it. This will eventually form psychological habits, and they can form for positive and negative thoughts and behaviors. If a child performs an act of generosity and is given contribution, love, significance, and growth in return, they will learn to associate that generosity with a good thing, and they will perform similar acts again and again. On the other hand, if somebody never had those needs fulfilled as a child, they might threaten somebody with a gun, get that fulfillment, and be tempted to repeat the action. It doesn't matter that their action. Chapter 6. Values, Beliefs, and Attitudes. This chapter will explain the following. 1. Defining values, beliefs, and attitudes. 1. How they coincide with Anthony Robbins' 6 fundamental human needs. 1. Essentially, somebody's values, attitudes, and beliefs play a major role in understanding behavior. In order to fully understand another person, it is essential first understand their belief system, values, and attitudes. This will help explain their behavior and give you a better idea of their perspective. Beliefs. Beliefs are the fundamental framework of a person's actions. A belief is a person's understanding of what something means. Some beliefs may be as concrete as factual evidence, like science or math, but other beliefs may be more spiritual, like religion or ideas based on past experiences. Some prime examples of beliefs are Mary is the mother of Jesus, that there is an afterlife or maybe there isn't an afterlife, that women and men should be treated as equals, or that people are born pure-hearted. Many beliefs are formed in the early stages of life and based on the beliefs of those around you, i.e., your parents and grandparents. Most beliefs are formed by the religion you grow up in, the education you receive as a child. The beliefs are formed before you even fully understand them. How can a 6-year-old rationalize to somebody why they believe God exists? They simply understand their beliefs based on where they are and who they are around. In addition to family and religion, beliefs are formed in school, from TV and newspapers, from their friends and friends' families. Many of these beliefs will follow us through from childhood to adulthood and will mainly be formed by what our parents have taught us. Values. A value is an emotional state that you believe is important to uphold or not uphold. Values are the behaviors associated with your belief system. They determine the things you find important in life and the standards you give yourself. So a belief may be that God lived a life of peace and love, He helped the poor and women and children alike. The value associated with that may be that you should always be mindful of the poor, you should volunteer and help others. The value associated with the belief tells you how you should live your life and how to act. Some of the values people are trying to escape are anger, hate, prejudice, sadness, frustration, and dishonesty. For each value a person holds, there is a belief system for how these values will be carried out. Attitudes. An attitude is the mental state that links your personal values and the behaviors associated with them. Attitudes play an important role, as they are not as firmly grounded as your belief and value systems, and can also be impacted by other influence in your life: stress, politics, those around you. Essentially, attitude is a form of belief that is flexible and depend on the situation you find yourself in. Beliefs, attitudes, values and the relation to 6 human needs. All people require the same basic 6 human needs. However, every person's beliefs, attitudes, and values are unique and different. The two groups feed off of each other and influence your everyday life. It is a complex dance between your needs and the attitudes, values, and beliefs you hold. Applying your beliefs, attitudes, values, and needs. Sit down and make a list of the values you wish to uphold, positive values, and the values you wish to avoid, negative values. Once you have your 2 lists, organize them starting with most important to least important. Highlight the top 3 values in each category. You are going to work the most on these. The next step is to take your top 6 values and write down your belief about how you can meet these values. For example, if you value charity and helping others, your belief may be that you donate all of your excess time and money to help those less fortunate than you. Or, you may believe that you should volunteer at least once a month to a charitable organization. Whatever you decide is acceptable for your life, write down your expectations. Compare your list to the list of needs. How do these 2 lists connect? Now to think critically. Analyze a situation in your life that you made a big decision about. How did this decision connect to your beliefs, values, attitudes, and needs? Let's use an example to explain how all of these factors are related. Your belief is that all people are created equal. You value equality in all situations. Your needs, in order, are significance, contribution, growth, uncertainty, love and connection, and certainty. Your current situation. You graduate from medical school and need to find a job. Let's assume school was mostly paid for through scholarships. You practice in your city. You know the business and feel confident that the outlook for business is good. You can quickly make a lot of money and buy a great house and continue your future. The second option is to work in Haiti for a few years and help vaccinate children in need. The job will not pay very much at all. You will be away from your family for a few years, but when you return, you can still open that practice. Chances are, you'd pick the position abroad. This is because it aligns with your core beliefs, values, and attitudes. If you truly believe that all are created equal, and you have the time and resources to devote, you should go help others who are less fortunate. All 6 needs are met with working abroad. You will feel significant by taking an honorable route. You will have contribution in being able to help others. You fulfill your belief that all people are equal. You will grow as a person from this experience as you meet many people, different communities, and life experiences. Whereas, the option of staying in your city and opening a practice may also fulfill some of the 6 needs, it will not contribute to your values and beliefs regarding equality. You have seen this practice in an example, now apply it to somebody that you know. You may not be able to fill in every need, as you cannot always think in the way that that person might, but do your best. Come up with the best analysis you can and use the insights you have been given. You will be able to create a decent analysis of the situation, and why that person chose the path they did. Take your time while doing this, as understanding how all of these aspects connects, will benefit you in your future decision making. Many people do not take the time to think about why they do things the way they do. This practice will allow you to see the interconnectedness of things. Bottom lines. A bottom line refers to a value that is hardwired, something you learned when you were young and holds value still. These beliefs affect every value, behavior, and attitude you have as your life continues. These bottom lines are a result of how your parents, guardians, etc. treated you. To understand another person, it is important to understand what their bottom line is. For example, one bottom line may be that a child is important and valued. This child grew up with their parents always allowing them to come first. The child's needs are first and foremost and will always be taken care of. Whether it is clothing, attention, or money, the child will always come first. As their assertions, those who interact with this adult will have more success if they understand this bottom line. Another example is a child who was raised with many siblings. They didn't receive as much parental attention, however they worked with their siblings to make sure that all the kids received the attention they needed. All kids worked together to make sure the others were successful. This person's bottom line is that people work together, they never give up on another. As this person becomes an adult, they give of their resources and time to those they love. They won't ever let people down. Even when significant others aren't necessarily pulling their weight, or need more attention, this person will give. It may appear that they are being a pushover, or overextending their resources, but that is not the case. This person was raised to help and love the ones around them and they will not give up. Many factors are involved in a person's emotional development, but one thing that will not change is their bottom line. This will remain the same throughout their life unless they make an active decision to change it and work diligently towards it. Follow-through and practical use. Do you know your bottom lines? If you are having troubles pinpointing your bottom line, it may help if you write down a few situations where you had a strong reaction to something. Work backwards, starting with your physical emotional reaction and working towards the belief you have that may be the factor driving your decisions. Now do this for somebody that you have a close relationship to. It is important to note that finding your bottom line can take time and is not necessarily an easy process. Be patient in this process, and it will be worth it. Chapter 7. Transactional Analysis, the 3 Ego States, and the Stroke Economy. This chapter will cover the 3 egos, how they interact, and the types of interactions they have. It will also cover the stroke economy and an alternative way. Transactional analysis. In 1957, psychiatrist Eric Berne developed the theory of transactional analysis. His theory describes how people can understand their personality and psychology for growth and change. This chapter will describe some of the basic principles of his theory, enough for our purposes. Transactional analysis is the study of how people interact with others. A transaction between people involves 2 or more people meeting and exchanging information, whether verbal or physical. He refers to the transactional stimulus as the moment when one person acknowledges the other. The transactional response is the other person's acknowledgement of the stimulus. For example, Mary and Dave are in line at the DMV. Mary looks at Dave and smiles. His smile was the stimulus. His response of, "hello" was the response. Byrne then suggests that people respond to others in one of the three ego states. The ego states are parent, child, and adult. It is important to note that one's ego state will differ from situation to situation and are not fixed states. All people have the capacity to act in any state, so we are now going to describe each state. Parent. The parent ego is derived from the learned behaviors and rules a child receives, often from a parent. These rules and observations are formed in the early years of an individual. These observations often come from a parent but can also be from any adult that has impact on the child. It is important to note that these observations are not analyzed by the child, not understood on a deeper level. They are face value ideas and rules that a person learns to live by. A prime example would be, wash your hands before dinner, or maybe, don't play with fire. The child doesn't fully understand the purpose of said rules, however they know to remember them and follow them. Ego state characteristics. Individuals in the parent state yelling at another person for doing something wrong, because that is how their own parents responded to others. Child. The personality characteristics of the child ego are comprised of the emotional responses a person had during their early years. In simplest terms, the child state can be thought of as the feeling state. This is a person who has an internal response to a given situation. Examples of child state emotions are, the dark is scary, or, it's funny to be tickled. Single quote. Ego state characteristics. An individual in the child state will respond to situations the way a child does. Instant emotional responses with no reasoning. Somebody in this state might sulk because they are unhappy, or act gleeful because they are happy. Adult. The personality characteristics of the adult state are actually combinations of the other two ego states. The adult combines the parent and child state and builds a bridge between them. Where the parent told the child what to do, and the child listened, the adult listens as the child, but builds the understanding as to why. For an example from our previous states, it's scary when it is dark. The adult would view this as, it's scary when it is dark because you can't see what's happening and crime is more prevalent at night. Single quote. Ego state characteristics. Individuals in the adult state are able to use reason to figure out a situation and logic to form a conclusion. A person in the adult state is able to calmly and rationally think through a situation, analyzing different solutions to truly understand what's going on. The adult uses their experiences in the child state to negotiate feelings. An important aspect of transactional analysis is the fact that many people cannot access recorded memories in the brain that actually trigger emotions. The emotions are still there and influence your life, but you may not understand why. An example of this would be an individual that is afraid of water. They have no recollection of unfortunate events involving water, but they just can't seem to get past this fear. Maybe this adult had an incident when they were a small child, and do not remember the incident clearly. However, the incident is recorded in the brain and the fear emotion is linked to it. What happened all over again? Byrne and Freud. Byrne's theory of the child, parent, and adult have many similarities to Freud's ID, ego, and superego. However, it is important to note the main difference between the two men's theories. Freud believed that if you dug enough into your past, you can uncover those memories and recall the situations that trigger your emotions. Byrne believed that you can get a similar understanding by watching the experiences of others. Byrne's ego states are roles that appear during interaction with others, whereas Freud's ID, ego, and superego are fixed within the individuals. Identifying the states. It is not a simple task to determine which emotional state a person is in, however, it is possible. Here is a list of observations that can be used to determine where a person lies. It is not necessary to show all of the signs, and sometimes people will have signs in multiple categories. There is no simple category to describe any person, but this list will help you get started. Signs for a parent. Lecturing. being overly critical, acting superior, a dominant stance, shaking your finger, staring somebody down, overly voicing your opinions and pushing them onto others, nagging. Signs for a child: head hanging down, avoiding eye contact, fidgeting, slumped posture, tapping feet or swimming legs, pouting, a high-pitched voice or whine, being overly quiet, low self-confidence, nervousness, being frightened, yelling, crying dramatically. Signs for an adult: accepting alternative views, relaxed posture, body language, confident tone of voice with assertive volume, talking through emotions, sharing perspective openly, able to correlate emotions with the reasons for them, takes responsibility for things. Assessing the states in action: when individuals interact with each other, they will each subscribe to one emotional state. The states are not determined by age and are not fixed, meaning they can change situation to situation. All individuals will primarily fall into one state the most often. It would be ideal for adults to state while interacting with them. Emotional states determine how a person responds to a specific situation. If you can pinpoint their most common emotional state, you will be more successful at interacting and communicating with them. Understanding a person's background will help determine their emotional state. For example, if Sally grew up taking care of her siblings, she might be prone to the parent state. In addition to the benefits of understanding somebody's emotional state, understanding how emotional states interact can prove helpful in analyzing situations. Emotional states are often played off of each other. For example, if one person begins to take on the parent role, the person they are interacting with may resort to the child role. If the second person is strong enough to withstand the parent person, they may be able to take on the adult role and handle it smoothly. Situations explained. Parent to child example: one person is standing tall with a snarl on their face. They have their hands resting on their hips and they say, "You're doing it all wrong." The second person is standing in front of the first, hands held together, with their head hanging low as they say, "Oops, I messed it all up." This is a typical parent-child communication that does not need to occur within the bounds of parent and child. This interaction could take place between coworkers, friends, adults, or two children. Adult to adult example: one adult standing relaxed, but assertive says, "It hurt my feelings when you were joking around with me yesterday. I thought you should know how I felt so we don't have to have this experience in the future." The other person is sitting relaxed with an understanding and slightly concerned face as they say, "I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I thought it was okay to joke like that, but I'll make sure not to do it in the future." Complementary versus cross-transactional situations. All transactional situations will begin with a stimulus, or one person acknowledging or talking to another. The stimulus will almost always be followed by a response, the other person acknowledging the first. Each combination of transactional states will result in a different, individualized dynamic. There are two main categories for transactional situations. They can either be crossed or get the proper response, and this ends with a lack in communication, conflict, or confusion. The second type of transactional situation is complementary. In a complementary interaction refers to both people having the same state and the stimulus prompts an appropriate response for that state. In other words, they are both coming at a situation from the same emotional stance and are able to effectively communicate. Situational examples. Example 1. Tom: "Have you walked the dog?" Sarah: "Yes, I took her out earlier." To analyze. Both Tom and Sarah are in the same emotional state of the adult. Tom asks a firm question and Sarah responds positively and with the information he needed. This was a successful transaction. Example 2. Tom: "Have you walked the dog?" Single quote. Sarah: "No, it's not my job to always take her out. Don't blame me for it not getting done. It's all your fault." To analyze. Tom asked Sarah a question in the adult state. Sarah responded in the child state and it started a conflict. The combination of these two states can result in miscommunications or sidetrack the main question. Example 3. Tom: "Hey sweetie, did you take the dog out earlier? You know she loves when you do." Sarah, smiling: "Yes, and I did a great job too." To analyze, Tom asked a question while maintaining the parent state. He expected Sarah to respond in the child state. When Sarah responded in the child state, their communication was effective. In this situation, Tom was actually an adult and Sarah was actually a child. Example 4. Tom: "Babe, did you take the dog out? She loves when you do. You're do good at it." Sarah: "No, and you're not going to persuade me to do it by talking to me like that." Nice try. Real-life application. Can you determine the state you spend the most time in? Think of a recent situation you had that lasted at least a few minutes and try to figure out what emotional state you were in and what state the other people involved were in. Putting theory to use. Understanding your emotional state and the states of others around you can have a profound impact on the communications you have. With your recent situation in mind, try and think about the patterns in your communication. Is it clear that you seem to fall into one state more than another? Does the other person seem to fall into one state as well? What states are they? How do they interact? It is preferable to spend most of our communications in the adult state, as it is easier to communicate effectively and politely. If you have found that you are involved in a great deal of conflict, analyze the state you were in during these conflicts. Could it be that you tend to resort to the parent stage while talking to other adults? Or do you easily have problems effectively communicating with others because you fall into the child state and can't convey your thoughts and emotions well? If you seem to have crossed transactions, dissect those situations and try to adjust your state for the next time you communicate with another person. By learning the states, you can learn how you should communicate with others. It may not always be easy. You may have to adjust your inner emotions and really structure your conversation, but it will result in more effective communication. If you have found that another person seems to have a difficult time with conversation or conflict, and you are close to this person, it may be worth your time to explain transactional analysis to them and how it works. When doing this, it is crucial to avoid falling into the parent state. Remain in the adult state and calmly rationalize how the other person's state may be interfering with cohesive communication. Remember to take responsibility for your behavior in the communication as well. Explain this theory as curious or new information, something interesting. Understanding transactional analysis can have a tremendous effect on your communication at work as well. In these situations, it will probably not benefit you to explain the theory to others, but it will benefit you to understand what states people fall into and how to communicate effectively in those states. You may find that you often speak in the parent state with the way you treat them. You may want to adjust this so your coworkers or employees don't take it as you treating them like a child. Being perceptive towards transactional analysis will help you get your point across in a clear, concise, polite manner. The importance of scripts. Transactional analysis is closely related to the formation of our ego states as a child. Essentially, when we are young, we develop patterns that are presented in our social interactions. As we grow up, many of these patterns stick with us and form our communication patterns. It's almost as if we are taught how to act in situations from a young age and stick with it throughout our lives. Some of our patterns will be positive and help us grow and communicate, and some will hinder us from succeeding in communication. If you find a problem and wish to change your script, you must first analyze yourself and your actions. You can mold a new path with your ego states, but it takes time and effort. Case study. Claire. Claire was born into a struggling family. She had many siblings and her parents were mostly absent. She helped to raise her siblings and took on many parent responsibilities. When she was 10, She and her siblings were all taken into state custody and raised in separate foster homes. In order to survive, Claire had to act as an adult in many situations. When she needed something or had to take care of herself, she was able to. She was often seen as rude to her friends when she talked about her life and all the responsibilities she had. She spoke to them from a parent-child perspective, belittling her friends. It was hard to socialize and interact with peers because of the disrupt in her childhood ego states. She was forced to take on this role when she was too young and often carried it over into her social interactions. Unfortunately, her lack of attention as a kid led her to disruptive behaviors at school. She was often displaying attention-seeking behaviors in class and acting like a class clown. Her need for attention displayed itself in a child ego. She often found herself in trouble at school and felt like an outsider. As she got older, Claire wanted to form better relationships and hopefully score a job. She knew that her behavior would have to change in order for her to be successful. She rented books from the library about transactional analysis and ego states, and set forth on a mission to better herself. When she recognized that her adult state was unable to properly disruptions, she read about how individuals act in the adult state. She took steps towards correcting her behavior and found ways to adjust her communication style. After working towards her goal, she was able to successfully land a job. In addition to the job, she found herself relating to her peers on an appropriate level, and even making some friends. Her efforts were successful. The stroke economy. In the 1960s, Claude Steiner developed his theory of the stroke economy. His theory was based on transactional analysis and Robbins' theory of the 6 basic needs. The stroke economy is efficient when it comes to understanding interactions between people and their reactions. Claude's theory focuses one of Robbins' needs: love. Claude believed that all people are essentially seeking to be loved and to love. We fear not being loved by others and strive to find it. Byrne focused on a stroke in his conclusions as well. He referred to the stroke as being recognized. Everybody wants to be recognized, whether a smile, a nod, or a sweet hello. It is important to understand that not all strokes are positive. Being recognized for something is not always affirmative. People can easily be recognized for poor things, like bad behavior. Claude theorized that all people need strokes to feel successful, and if we can't gain positive strokes, negative ones will suffice. The stroke economy aligns itself well with the bottom line theory of understanding and Robbins' 6 needs. Significance. Claude Steiner saw many people acting in a particular way and came up with the stroke economy as an explanation for said actions. The 5 rules that will make you miserable. Steiner's stroke economy is comprised of 5 rules that he believed we should avoid. He found that the 5 rules will leave you feeling guilty, shameful, not worthy, and disapproved of in social situations. These rules must be controlled by the parent ego. Steiner found that people who live by these rules tend to have low self-esteem. His rules are as follows. 1. Do not give strokes that you would like to give. If you see a stranger and think that they are gorgeous, but you don't want to be seen as a creep for saying such, don't. 20. Do not ask for strokes that you want to get. If you are feeling frumpy and would like to hear that you look good, don't go asking for a compliment. 3. Do not accept strokes that you want to hear. If somebody tells you that you are looking nice, do not simply nod and agree, it comes off as looking snotty. 40. Accept. 5. Do not give yourself strokes. Don't tell yourself that you are valuable, gorgeous, worthy, and loved. If you don't celebrate your accomplishments, you will just be hard on yourself. Stroke economy in action. Let's begin by making a list of strokes that you've gotten today and the ones you have given. Are you following along with the stroke economy? Think about an important relationship in your life. Could this relationship be better if you weren't as impacted by the rules in the stroke economy? Does the other person subscribe to the stroke economy? Did you learn anything about this person? An alternative way. Here is the alternative to following the miserable rules. 1. Give all the strokes you would like to give. Do not be turned away because the idea of giving positive strokes would make you vulnerable. Go ahead. Tell the stranger she is pretty and tell the person you love, I love you. 2. Ask for strokes that you desire. You can't always spend your time hoping to hear something nice. Tell somebody you care about that you're feeling down and want to hear something positive. Ask for help and support, they'll give it. 3. Accept negative strokes. We don't all hear the things we want to hear, but accepting it will be good for you. People are telling you these things for a reason, so listen. 4. Go ahead and reject strokes that you don't like. If a stranger slaps your butt, go ahead and tell them that they are gross. Don't hold it in. Be bold and let people know that some things aren't going to fly with you. Bear in mind that keeping your composure will benefit you. Don't lose your cool. 5. Give yourself the strokes you want. You are aware of the things you need and want. Telling yourself that you're great will make you feel good. You need to support yourself first and foremost. Thinking positively will help you act positively. If you want people to understand you and help you, go ahead and follow these rules. They will help build healthy relationships as you express your desires, needs, and emotions. By being positive and open, you will help the others around you have this same attitude. If you're having a hard time figuring somebody else out, be honest. Whether strangers or those close to us, following this stroke economy will help you understand people. It does not take a lot of experience to see whether somebody is abiding by the stroke economy or the alternative way. Try to determine which method each person is using. If you are having a difficult time, go back over the rules. Don't cheat. Don't look at the analysis until you've made your decision. Situation 1. Tom. A smile on his face. You're looking nice today. Did you get a new outfit? Sarah. Avoiding eye contact. Yeah, it is new. Analysis. Tom has used the alternative way by giving Sarah a positive stroke. Sarah is subscribing to the stroke economy as she is not able to accept his compliment. Situation 2. Tom smiles and holds the door open for Sarah. Sarah accepts Tom's gesture and walks through the door saying, "Thanks." Analysis. Tom and Sarah are subscribing to the alternative way. Tom gave her a positive stroke and Sarah accepted the positive stroke. Situation 3. In this situation Tom is Sarah's boss. Tom sees that Sarah has been doing a fine job but won't praise her as it might make him appear weak. Sarah. She believes she's been working really hard and doing a great job. She asks Tom, "Can I have a little feedback about how I've been doing? I want to know if I'm being successful." Analysis. Tom is adhering to the stroke economy by not positively praising Sarah. Sarah is subscribing to the alternative way, as she sees that a positive stroke can help her be successful emotionally and at work. She knows how to get her needs met, so she's going to ask for her stroke. Situation 4. Sarah is Tom's mom. Sarah, you have been acting like a nice boy lately. I want you to know that you're working very hard and I love you so much. Tom says, "Thanks, Mom. I love you too." Analysis. Sarah and Tom are adhering to the alternative way by giving strokes and accepting strokes. Try to follow the alternative way for a while. See what happens. Do people respond positively to you? Does it help you? How do others act when you use this method? Are you able to draw any conclusions about these people? A man under a microscope. The stroke economy is a powerful tool towards self-actualization and analysis of those around you. Next we will look at a true story of a man who adhered to the stroke economy and eventually decided to change his ways and choose the alternative way. Case study. Billy. Billy was one of many children. His family did not have a lot of money and he grew up not wanting many of the material possessions that many had. His clothes may have been secondhand and his toys were few, but he didn't want more. His family was unable to give him the attention he needed, as both parents worked long hours and didn't have a lot of free time. Billy's sisters took care of him most of the time, but they were busy doing their own things. Billy did not receive many positive strokes, and often acted out at school. He got the attention he desired by acting out. It may have been negative attention, but it was something. As Billy got older, he realized that his negative behavior wasn't going to get him anywhere. If he wanted to succeed, he had to stop seeking negative strokes. He realized he had to work hard towards changing his ways, but that the payout could be massive. When his behavior started to change, he still wasn't receiving positive strokes, as people were criticizing him and tell him he should have always acted like this. This left Billy unsure of what to do. He was on longer trying to get negative strokes, but didn't know how to ask for positive ones. Robert began to fall into a depression, as he wasn't sure how to be happy. He stopped giving others positive strokes because he was jealous that he wasn't getting any. He was angry and vulnerable, just wanting to connect to others. When he was nearly 30 years old, he fell into a bad depression. He quit working, stopped visiting the family, and lost all hope for life. When his friends and family finally noticed his need for help, they sent him to rehab and therapy. After 3 months in a community of love and compassion, he realized the source of his depression. It took a long time, but eventually he was able to realize his needs and learned how to meet said needs in a positive way. Now Billy is fully aware of the stroke economy and the alternative way. Chapter 8. What is the drama triangle? The best way to really get someone, to understand them on a deeper level, is to notice their interactions with other people. For example, if you notice an intense argument between two people, try to study how they act with each other. You will notice some hints of how each participant sees themselves in relation to the other. From that, you can gather how they might act in the same scenario, but with other dialogue participants. That is what the drama triangle is. It's basically a way to understand these social interactions and why they happen. How the concept came to be. If you've heard about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, this will be easier to understand. After World War II, many veterans had to manage their post-war trauma. As such, they went to therapy sessions before they even got back to their families. Now, some of those therapy sessions were successful and they adjusted back to family life. Others weren't as lucky, unfortunately. Thus, family therapy was created. Therapists felt that treating people in a social setting would yield much better results than dealing with them by themselves, as individuals. They felt that focusing on communication as a therapeutic method would be more in line with the true human psyche. Eric Berne elaborated on the findings of those therapists 10 years or so later. He furthered the understanding of interrelational psychology to his contemporaries and brought more complex explanations to existing data. Stephen Karpman was the one who came up with the Karpman triangle in 1968. He was one of Berne's students and managed to use his teacher's information and helped to publish his own article. The Karpman triangle is a template in which one could define what role a certain person plays in social interactions. Especially an intensely emotional one. Karpman's article was inspired from research on family therapy, as well as ideas used in transactional therapy. It also elaborated on the importance of group interactions in the whole scheme of things. So, what use does it have? The Karpman or drama triangle is an excellent technique to know when you're watching a social interaction unfold. Or, why not, when you're actually participating in one. That is why it is important to apply it in your own case as well. It's useful for deciphering the social signals others might be sending you. Similarly, it is helpful if you want to understand why people respond to your signals the way they do. First off, we're going to talk a bit about the 3 roles you will find in the drama triangle. Here they are. along with their character traits. The persecutor, as the name implies, the persecutor is the aggressive one in the whole equation. They are usually angry or blaming someone for something or other. The defining characteristic of the persecutor is the air of superiority they take. They never compromise, and like to boss people around. The victim, these people, on the other hand, always feel like they are being oppressed, with no power to fight back. It's very hard for them to find any positivity in anything, and can never express themselves properly. Ultimately, they feel like they are helpless and without hope for the future, always in a state of victimization. The rescuer, you guessed it. The rescuer saves the previous character from the first. Though selfless and altruistic, his habits are sometimes detrimental to the victim. This is because he acts as an enabler of the victim's constant feeling of victimization. Not only that, but the rescuer can also push the persecutor to act in the same bossy, superior. Of course, interactions that end with an amicable disagreement have a different triangle to them. It is called the winner's triangle and will be discussed later. In the meantime, let's return to our persecutor, victim, and rescuer, shall we? Any person will normally be one of these three types in almost any argument. But that doesn't mean we can't take on different roles at other times. The victim can always become the persecutor or vice versa. Stressful situations can have us cycle through all three roles in one go. That also depends on others in the conversation and by how we tend to interact with them. Now, while we can shift through these roles at times, the dominant role will be decided during our formation years. Our families, early social interactions, and experiences will define who we are later in life. There are some questions that arise from the above. Is it healthy to be in any of the three positions? Not really, as the motivation behind taking on the mantle of persecutor, victim, or rescuer is implicitly unhealthy. They don't lead to any sort of achievements. So why do we keep acting like one of these three archetypes? It all comes down to human nature, really. Not every parent will properly raise their child to assert themselves in a healthy manner. Nor will they be able to teach them good ways of getting what they want without some destructive impulses getting in the way. As such, when we do get into a situation where we want to achieve something, we shift into one of those three roles. We feel emboldened by becoming one of the archetypes, but in doing so we're actually doing more damage than good. Transactional theory also deals with this concept. People can take on three possible roles: parent, adult, or child. These roles are, of course, chosen according to how we were brought up to interact with others. They also relate to our experiences, and are a way of affirming ourselves in the world. The question remains as to whether these methods are healthy or not. In any case, let's get back to our three primary characters. By taking on the role of persecutor, short-term benefit, profound. A long-term benefit if they were to take on that role for most of their waking hours. These rewards will be detailed for each persona, respectively. The persecutor, when it comes to the superficial rewards of the persecutor, it all comes down to how they deal with their self-esteem. Most of the time, the persecutor has low self-esteem, so they emanate an air of importance to others. That, in turn, will make them feel noticed and significant even though they might not be. It all gives them a sense of control that they cannot get through other ways, because they have not been raised to properly deal with such situations. It's an easy way out of having to actually deal with the underlying feelings of abandonment and hurt. Plus, it is their way of punishing themselves for their behavior, a way to reinforce their own belief that they're bad people at heart. In the long term or the profound reward, the persecutor realizes that they're actually bad for acting the way they are. Simply put, they are unpleasant to be around, and people will want to avoid their persecutor behavior. One usual habit of this archetype is to lure people who are constantly in the role of the victim. They end up in a constant back and forth, and the process repeats itself when the victim has had enough of the former's shenanigans. In the end, the persecutor realizes that they will never get the recognition or fulfillment they're so desperately seeking. The victim on the other end of the triangle, we have the victim with about the same internal issues. They require care and love, so they will eternally play victim for people to notice them. The attention is their superficial, short-term reward. The worst part is that they feel they shouldn't have any of the blame for their actions. Yes, that means always shifting responsibility onto someone or something else. What may result from that is someone who acts however they want, because they will always get the persecutor, or positive from the rescuer is of little importance. In the long run, the victims realize that they must take responsibility for their actions if people are to stop avoiding them. That means trying to cope with their pessimistic worldview, and attempting some positivity for a change. Unfortunately, the victim almost never feels in control of their own destiny but will never take steps to change that, preferring instead to live in constant self-loathing. They will also act as enablers for the persecutors and rescuers. The rescuer superficially, this archetype is still looking for feelings of appreciation and love from others. As such, they will concentrate all their attention on others. That means they never consider their own needs and problems, which is still a negative trait. Unlike the persecutor, these characters become assertive by being extremely altruistic. They can also unleash their deep-seated anger in the name of the victim because they feel they shouldn't be too hard on their own selves. That will possibly lessen their feelings of rejection. Still, the rescuer will be so occupied with other victims that they will never find time for their own needs, just for the short-term goal of being seen as a selfless person. In the long run, the rescuer will just end up feeling neglected, and will end up hating the victims for it. Since selfless people always care for others and never ask for anything in return, their needs are overlooked. It comes as no surprise that this will reinforce their thoughts of insignificance. Just as the victim, the rescuer never acts for themselves. Instead, they act as an enabler for victims and persecutors. Also, they will end up burning out by not paying any attention to their own feelings, and having to be there for everybody. How the drama triangle looks like in practice. Let's look at an example of how a drama triangle would work out. Our characters are named Terry, Alice, and Jane. Terry didn't take the dog out as he promised so many times. Alice ends up doing it herself, and has become sick of it. Jane is a friend who happens to visit every once in a while. Alice, you haven't walked the dog like I asked you to do. How many times do I have to repeat it before you do it? Single quote. Terry, I'm sorry, honey. Don't get so angry over nothing. Single quote. Alice, nothing. You never take out the dog. Maybe I'd like to have time to myself sometimes, you know. Single quote. Jane, now, Alice. You know Terry isn't doing it intentionally. He's just been busy at the office and the boss asked him to do some extra work at home. No need to shout. Single quote. What do we gather from this discussion? Alice, the persecutor, is annoyed that she has no time for herself. She feels it is all the fault of the victim, Terry. He, on the other hand, doesn't feel responsible for his actions and lets out an inappropriate response for this case. As a consequence, Alice goes even further into persecutor mode. Jane acts as the rescuer in the whole ordeal. She excuses Terry for not walking the dog as he said he'd do. Terry will end up cleared of responsibility because the rescuer has taken his side. Alice will inevitably get angrier because she feels they're putting the blame on her. As such, Jane acts as an enabler for Terry the victim and Alice the persecutor. Try this yourself. You too can create a drama triangle and explore how your interactions with others work. Do the following. Think of 3 recent arguments or conflicts you participated in. Write them down similarly to the example above. No need to overcome. Try to figure out who filled the role of victim, persecutor, and rescuer. In the end, you will try to determine which role you fill in most of the time. Are you always persecuting everyone? Playing the eternal victim? Now, try to think of the reason why that happens. Also, consider how your behavior affects you and those around you. Do the same for the other parties involved in the conflict. All things considered, this all sounds mildly depressing, unhealthy, and filled with conflict. Is there a way of dealing with conflict that's healthy at the same time? Well, that's why we have the winner's triangle. What is the winner's triangle? A.C. Choi created this model at the beginning of the 90s. What is its relation to the drama triangle? Well, using the exercise we provided in the previous section, you can gain a bit of insight into your reactions. By studying those, you can understand when you're taking on a drama role, and work towards healthier ones. Namely, the ones in the winner's triangle. Here are the 3 roles we will be discussing. Assertive. The assertive person has no trouble expressing themselves clearly. Their thoughts will not sound passive or aggressive, and they do not care for any possible rejection or disapproval. Instead, an assertive will voice their opinion with calm, and will try not to feed the fires of conflict. This helps others understand where you're coming from. Unlike the persecutor, people will not hate you for simply telling everyone they're wrong about you. If you communicate your thoughts clearly, you can avoid some headaches well in advance. Vulnerable. A vulnerable is basically a victim but without the constant victim complex. They communicate their negative feelings, but will assume responsibility when that is the case. Furthermore, they always try to think how they got in their current predicament. A caring person will not forget about their own needs while they act as a rescuer for others. In essence, they're very balanced when it comes to social interactions. They help when they feel their contribution will make a positive difference. Will allow others to assume responsibility for their own actions. Never promote unhealthy roles such as those in the drama triangle. What do we gain out of this? In combination with the drama triangle exercise, you can do a more in-depth analysis of someone. Do they shift from a healthy to an unhealthy role a lot of times? Of course, nobody can be a winner all the time, but causing drama in 70% of cases is not great either. This is where you can really see if the person you're analyzing has any deep-rooted childhood issues left over. It can also tell you how hard they're working to resolve them in their current stage. Children, on the other hand, are an entirely different case. The young ones are just in their formative stage and could switch from one role to another. The older ones are possibly just starting to make that decision. They are very susceptible to role models in their formative years, so the best thing to do is lead by example. Become the role model they seek by training to step off the drama triangle and onto the winner's side. We'll be honest with you. It won't be easy. But it will definitely be worth the effort. You just need to be honest about what you're trying to do with those around you. If you find someone dear to you on the drama side of things, it would be best to have a basis on which you can explain these theories. Just be careful to explain it to them while there is an unresolved conflict taking place. Again, some people might find your explanation insulting, but some tough truths need to be told sometimes. Start by telling them your position on the triangles and how you're striving to improve yourself. They will understand where you're coming from if you do it in a compassionate manner. Of course, it might take them a few days to process all the information. Patience is key. How the winner's triangle looks like in practice now. The theory sounds nice and all. Except we all know that practice makes perfect, and is the best way to learn about anything. As such, we will present you with 3 real cases of people shifting triangles, so to speak, and becoming winners themselves. Use their examples wisely in order to improve your own status. Sarah. Because Sarah grew up in a lower-income family, both her parents needed to work to make ends meet. Her mother wasn't around much, so she was raised by nannies. She didn't get the necessary motherly affection as a child, so her self-esteem had to suffer. Not only that, but she ended up being angry with her parents and struggling with abandonment issues. Naturally, she couldn't communicate her feelings properly because of those problems. Her mother would return tired from work and couldn't give her the affection she needed. This made Sarah feel unworthy. Her mother was often a persecutor, leaving her father to play the role of victim. Sarah would sometimes end up in the rescuer's role. Since the mother was the only consistent feminine role model she had, she turned persecutor herself. This was especially clear when she interacted with other children in her class. As a young woman, Sarah would be enabled as a persecutor by her sister, who often played victim. It only ended up hurting her ability to get close to people. The fear of abandonment was too strong. She felt after all, who would want to be friends with someone so overly critical of every little thing? Still, all she wanted was affection and some understanding. She was just too afraid of communicating that fact and showing others her kind and gentle side. Luckily, Sarah met someone in her late 20s that would change that for her. Instead of enabling her as a persecutor, this person made her understand what she was doing wrong. It ended up being an eye-opening experience for Sarah, and she started struggling towards fixing those abandonment issues. Through care and understanding, Sarah toned down her bossy nature and began defying the persecutor role she had gained in her childhood. She began to be an assertive instead, which benefited her relationships greatly. No longer did she respond with anger when she wasn't being noticed. Instead, she just communicated her feelings in a calm manner and people finally understood where she came from. Ultimately, that helped her understand others just as well, helping them become winners as she had managed to do. Unlike Sarah, Nigel got plenty of affection from his parents. In fact, you could say it was too much affection. They were not responsible enough to set some boundaries and instill some discipline. If he started crying, he knew that his mother would act as a rescuer even if he did something wrong. Naturally, he was going to suffer through grade school because he was not accustomed to negative reactions from anybody. He would just become upset and difficult to communicate with. Even as he grew older, he felt like a sad outcast. Ever the victim, he still gained enough attention from rescuers in his life. But this meant he would have no opportunity to grow as a person. Sure, he could go to college and find a job, but those are simply materialistic goals. Inside, he felt just as sad and lonely as always. He could not recognize his shortcomings, and neither could he see how others viewed him as a person. In the end, he got tired of the constant melancholy and the lack of friends. He started studying psychology and self-improvement techniques. It helped him understand how he got into his situation and what steps were necessary for change. Realizing that being a victim all the time would not help, he worked on becoming more assertive. That meant learning how to express his sorrows in a more constructive way than just whining about it. Sure, it was a difficult change to make, but his social interactions had definitely improved because of his effort. His parents could not believe this shift in character from Nigel. And yet, it was probably nice seeing him make true friends and claim some responsibility once in a while. He managed to learn how to communicate his feelings in a healthy manner, despite fears of rejection or the thought of discomfort. It was much easier to communicate with him, as a result. He would not simply shut down as he did in grade school. This made him think of a brighter future. Brenda's father left the family before she and her brothers and sisters even turned 8. Her mother eventually married someone else, and had 2 more children. As such, Brenda was the oldest of 5 children. It wasn't a happy life for Brenda, as her mother struggled with alcoholism for the rest of her life. She would pick up the slack and take care of her siblings when her mother couldn't. The new husband was abusive to the family. Now, While Brenda didn't receive much attention from her parents, she still felt the affection of her siblings. She needed to act as a rescuer for them when things got tough around the house. But, if you remembered what we discussed about rescuers, you would know that Brenda was neglecting her own needs. Her frustration was thus exteriorized by defending others. While she was kind, she couldn't form any meaningful relationships with others her age. She couldn't fill the role of rescuer for them anymore. Instead, she found new ways to do it. This only exacerbated her feelings of insignificance and neglect, which lead her down the path of alcoholism just like her mother before her. At 30 years old, Brenda ended up in a psychiatrist's office to deal with her internalized anger. He helped her realize that in order for her to enact change, she would need to learn how to open up to others. With time, she learned how to do it, and managed to quit her addiction and unhealthy drama triangle role. Now, you might believe that these stories are too extreme to apply to everyone. But, when you look at the facts, we all deal with our feelings according to how our parents raised us. Similarly, the way we interacted with others during childhood has a strong effect. Parents deal with their own problems and can't always prevent ours. Sure, Sarah, Nigel, and Rachel probably had it harder than most of us, not to detract from those who went through such difficulties. But their stories are a great illustration of how childhood experiences can affect us later in life. Everyone is different, however, so these examples are not always applicable. There's still a nice way to understand why a person behaves a certain way. By analyzing the hopes, dreams, and fears of others, we can end up discovering something within ourselves as well. In the end, we all have something to gain from such experiences. How to create meaningful relationships. Chapter 9. Evaluating individuals in the workplace. Average adults now spend around 30% of their lives working. This means 1/3 of our waking hours is spent on the job at the workplace. The office becomes a home away from home. Relationships with coworkers are formed since so much of our time is spent interacting with them. Friendships develop, and in many cases, our colleagues become almost a second family. It is important to understand and get along each other in order to have a well-functioning, productive team. This congeniality may be more difficult to apply in practice since each one of us has individual characteristics. Being able to recognize and analyze the personality traits of coworkers will go a long way in maintaining harmony and remaining upwardly mobile without causing any friction. How well do you know your colleagues, including your boss? How do they respond to your instructions, speeches, or presentations? The answers to these questions are important in a competitive job market where your actions and intentions are scrutinized continuously. This chapter examines these issues so that the time and energy you expend at the workplace is maximized in terms of opportunities and relationships. Images and perceptions. It is essential to know how you appear to fellow workers since your professional image really does matters to your superiors, colleagues, and subordinates. Conflict makes it difficult to function, and life at the workplace can become unbearable and unproductive if you're disliked. Under such stress, you may begin to doubt your aptitude for the job. It is equally important to manage impressions in order to coexist and deliver advantageous outcomes for you, the team, and organization. This can be done by recognizing and managing any of the following destructive and constructive behaviors. Smiles and good cheer. Do people smile around you? Do their faces light up when you enter the room? Do they approach you and greet you warmly? If there is a cheerful, natural, spontaneous reaction your presence, it means you are accepted. They may in turn have determined that you are competent, or help. Ready acknowledgement. Being readily acknowledged by a word, smile, or a friendly gesture such as a wave or a handshake shows a camaraderie between you and your coworkers. They welcome and recognize you as a valued member of the team. This is definitely an advantageous position to be in. Being ignored is never a good indicator of what your coworkers think of you. If they don't greet you because they don't wish to acknowledge you, that's a problem. If they can't be bothered to say hello, or simply don't notice your presence, that doesn't bode well for your success in the organization. The group mentality. Groups develop at work because of mutual interests, compatible natures, or closeness in occupational situations. It could be a positive outcome because joining forces can get the work done faster and better. A group can have the power to push for benefits or stop bad practices. On the other hand, cliques may work against coworkers by spreading rumors and lies, and bullying and intimidating them in order to prevent their optimal performance. Gossip spreads fast in the workplace and you would know where you stand soon enough. Better not to align oneself with any group but do lend support for a good cause. Ostracized by coworkers. You know all's not well at work when coworkers avoid any contact with you. If they turn their backs when they see you coming or answer your questions with perfunctory replies only when they have to, there is a reason why coworkers do not wish to interact with you and the problem needs to be addressed. Getting the cold shoulder may be a bullying tactic, or else you may have personality traits that don't appeal to your coworkers. Do you talk too much, or are you a pessimist? Are you the silent type, or do you brag? Negative habits can and should be reversed for better workplace interaction and communication. Personal or professional. A professional relationship with workmates is all well and good, but spending so much time together does create personal associations too. If your opinion is never asked and you're not included in shared jokes or invited to after-work social get-togethers, it would be safe to say your workplace relationships are non-existent. Colleagues are either ignoring you, like you, or you have not impressed them enough to be noticed. It's frustrating to be ignored and distanced. Time to start asking questions of yourself and any empathetic coworker to remedy the situation. Refusal to make eye contact. Eye contact is a powerful, instinctive response that connects us to others. When people look at us when we speak, we feel we have their attention and interest. When a colleague looks away or focuses their gaze elsewhere while you speak, you realize they have stopped listening. People avoid making eye contact for varied reasons. They may be going through a hard time and don't want their expressions to reveal this. Or else they may be shy, embarrassed, or lack confidence. It could be that coworkers avoid your gaze because they don't respect, trust, or like you, in which case you must make behavior improvement to engage them. Speaking to an audience. Most office jobs entail making presentations and speeches to coworkers. We may be introducing new strategies, or thanking or honoring a colleague, or saying goodbye to them after years of service to the company. Whatever the occasion, our words and delivery must be distinct, measured, and meaningful. Public speaking is not for the faint-hearted or those who suffer from stage fright, though there are times when making a report or presentation can't be avoided. Luckily, it is the office orators that are usually chosen for the task of making a speech, but they have to be on top of their game to successfully get their message across. The speech or presentation contains a core message, and the aim of the speaker is to deliver this statement to the audience. Once there is an understanding of the simplicity of making a good speech or presentation, even the most unwilling speakers will feel capable of facing an audience. There is a lot of advice from professional speakers about how an orator's performance can be improved and perfected. None of the do and don'ts matter if the speaker fails to provide what the audience requires. Knowing your audience is vital. Finding out information about age, education, work areas, and interests which will help you choose relevant material for your speech. Younger workers will relate to today's technology and will find jokes about their smartphones and the latest trends amusing, whereas an older group will be more in tune with more familiar processes and stories of yesteryear. No point in talking about market crashes to firefighters, or making jokes about the 60s to people who were born decades later. Checking background details will reveal the educational levels of your audience. If you are speaking to an assembly line crew, you will not use the technical jargon you would use on scientists. That does not mean talking down to your listeners. Respect your audience level and design the content of your speech specifically for their consumption. Language has to suit the audience and words used must be easily understood by them. For instance, if one is addressing a group of retirees, you will not apply the language used by the newest employees. Your references and anecdotes must also match your listeners. Focus on structure and keep on simplifying your message and delivery. Edit out anything that isn't relevant. If a line is confusing or contradictory, toss it out. Your audience knows what you are going to speak about and are interested in the topic and want to find out more about it. They want to hear what you have to tell them. Speak of things that will engross, inform, entertain, and be remembered. They want more information, and provided your speech engages them, the audience will be pleased that they came to listen to you. Understanding the culture of your audience members is very important when speaking at home and overseas. It should never be the intention to give offense, and yet this could be easily done with one inappropriate sentence just because the speaker was unaware of cultural differences. A background check will let you know the social origins of the listeners, and a bit of research will enable you to find out their areas of interest and what type of humor appeals to them. One audience may be open and unfazed by certain remarks, while another can be conservative and insulted by the same comments. An Eastern audience will not be able to identify with the concerns of a Western audience. Your speech must meet expectations, so find the right tone by ensuring the message fits the occasion. Inform, motivate, and challenge your audience, and most of all, keep it real. In some cases you may not know much about the people you will be speaking to, though you will know the size of your audience and whether the gathering is a compulsory company affair or not. A larger audience requires a more commanding speaker who will address the crowd with passion and authority, while a smaller group will do better with a conservative speaker. And want to feel that their time at the speech wasn't wasted. Use statistics to make a point and surprise them. Try not to repeat yourself. Be authentic and let the people know you are there for them because you are as passionate as they are about the subject you are going to share. Evaluate the person you work for. Workplace analysis doesn't stop with employees and their abilities or orators and their speeches. The main person at the office is the boss, but he shouldn't be above scrutiny. This is important because your livelihood depends on his judgment, and since you spend so many hours working for the boss, it is important that the office is a pleasant place. The man you answer to may not be ultra-perceptive or have more experience than you do, but he's still the boss and he does have supremacy over the people he manages. Knowing his habits will make for a better workplace relationship. It allows you to be proactive and anticipate his next move. Knowing the traits of the person you work for will creating more effective operations and harmony in the workplace, so analyzing this individual is important. Bosses give a lot of themselves to the job and expect the same in return from their team. A good boss will show you how to do this, while a bad boss will not work with you and hinder your process. A good boss will organize, motivate, and inspire his employees to build a congruent, productive organization. Key factors of the boss's personality that need to be evaluated are temperament, capabilities, and drive. Since a person's disposition guides their actions, it is important to recognize the type of person your livelihood depends on. Characteristics of a boss. All we human beings have diverse characteristics, and bosses are no different. After all, they are human too, at least most of the time. Typically, a boss has certain particular characteristics that subordinates must be aware of in order to manage situations. After all, success or failure at the office usually depends on how well you manage your boss. Certain personality traits can make the workplace heaven or hell, so look out for these types of bosses. The reliable boss. Reliability is a good trait for a boss to have. It means he or she is systematic, dependable, and responsible. These types have an excellent understanding of key aspects of their department and can be counted on for direction and consistency. And keep them connected and focused. They accept responsibility and expect their people to be accountable too. If they require high standards from their employees, their own standards are higher. If you have a reliable boss, consider yourself lucky. Work with a reliable boss is structured, efficient and productive, but mind you hold up your end of business because reliability is expected of you as well. The bully boss. These sorts of people manage to find themselves in leadership positions by aggressively presenting themselves as tough, go-getters. Bully bosses don't care how others are trampled in their race to the top. They humiliate, abuse, criticize, and threaten their workers. They know how to misuse employees to get ahead in the workplace, and staff are usually too intimidated by bullying tactics to challenge such behavior. Bullies will blame their workers for problems and question their commitment. Some bosses listen to your calls and read your mail. Constant abusive exploitation that continually degrades will ultimately break an employee down. A bully is one of the worst bosses you can ever have the misfortune to work for. The solution is simple. Look for a new job, since a bully boss enjoys his behavior and has no intention of changing his atrocious habits. The sociable boss. These ones are friendly, energetic and interested in their surroundings. They are cognizant of company aims and know what is required to achieve them. This sort of boss has no problem socializing structural objectives to generate a better understanding and awareness of organizational direction. Such bosses recognize the abilities of their team and encourage and assist whenever necessary. They create valuable relationships with other departments, enabling better communication between teams. They support and promote advancement in their employees and know that they are responsible for continued development in themselves. Sociable bosses expend a huge amount of energy, and it is sometimes hard for their employees to keep up with them. The micromanaging boss. They are driven by an obsessive need to control everything and everybody around them. They strive for perfection and create obstacles in the way of smooth operations by insisting on involving themselves in every aspect of business. They find it impossible to delegate, since they don't trust others to do the job to their satisfaction even when it is well done. This type of boss is a nightmare to work with. Employees. Better to stay clear of such types, because sooner or later they will wear you out and drive away. The empathetic boss. Empathy is a significant characteristic for anyone to possess. In a boss, this is an excellent trait. As a leader of a team, a boss must have the emotional intelligence to understand people in order to improve performance and effectiveness. An empathetic boss cares about how others feel and considers the effects of business procedures on his workforces. Personnel are able to approach such a boss and are not afraid to ask for answers or assistance. Taking into account personal experiences or perspectives of employees creates a wider understanding for maximized productivity. By being empathetic, a boss can solve problems, manage conflict, drive innovation, and increase the potential of job success for everyone. The honest boss. Honesty is a constructive leadership trait. An honest boss is more personally engaged with employees, solving problems, and bringing people together. Employees interact with this boss while perspectives and opinions are openly shared. Assets are recognized by such a boss, who will assign people to areas they are suited to. A transparent boss actually strengthens his leadership as his workers trust him. If the boss lies to you about your prospects in the company, you will be frustrated and annoyed when you are not promoted and discover there is no room for your growth and advancement. Or he could let you do all the work and take credit for it. No one wants to work for a dishonest person. A good leader does not allow power to get in the way of honesty, openness, and authenticity. The workaholic boss. These are driven, hyperactive bosses who are usually indifferent and dismissive towards those who work at a different pace. Working for a workaholic can be difficult, since they expect you to follow their addiction to work and don't recognize you have a life outside the office. Keeping up with this type of boss will burn you out, as you can never hope to keep up to their stringent standards. Try to communicate your requirements and do not enable such a boss by giving in to unnecessary work demands. If you have done a good job, it doesn't matter how much time was involved. This is not a bad sort of person, but this kind of boss is bad for you since you will end up stressed and burnt out. Don't compromise your talent and reliability and move on to a more suitable work environment. The paranoid boss. This is an insecure person who is suspicious and does not trust anyone. They are usually hypersensitive and imagine the world is against them. They are jealous of others' success and can be quite malicious at times. A paranoid boss blames his mistakes on others and will embarrass and demoralize employees to feel secure. This person does not encourage cooperation and instead turns employees against each other, and encourages personnel to spy or inform on each other. They use manipulation to hold back vital information so that colleagues cannot operate effectively. This person may not even realize he has a problem. Anyway, the problem is always the fault of someone else. A paranoid boss has too many issues going on in his head and isn't likely to make any behavioral changes. You can make a change by moving on to a more conducive workplace. The capabilities of your boss. This section determines the competences of your boss to figure out his or her intelligence so that you have a better understanding of this person. A boss with high mental capacity can speak and write well and has an ability to learn and understand and cope with situations. He can peruse documents and evaluate information easily, and logically find solutions to problems. A highly intelligent boss may get impatient with workers who don't have the mental agility that he does, so a worker will have to step up their skills in order to please him. However, this boss is a progressive type of person who readily accepts new concepts and transformation. Bosses with low intelligence may be aware of their lack of brainpower and react to smarter people by being antagonistic towards them. They will definitely have poor language skills and be resistant to change. They may have a hard time reading and comprehending information. To get into their good graces, an employee will have to adopt a helpful attitude that is not intimidating but reflects a sense of security. What motivates your boss? It's all very well to work hard within the framework of an organization's objectives in order to get ahead, but that's not going to do it. Career success depends on how well you understand your boss and how well you manage his needs. Do you know what motivates him? Is he driven by power or money? Does he really care about his employees? These and many other questions will have to be answered in order to know what makes the person you work for tick. One concept about the temperament of bosses theorizes that there are basically three motives that drive business. These causes are power, affiliation. Their team must be devoted followers. They are puffed up with their own importance and want to make their mark on the world. This type of boss is difficult to work with since they are not at all impressed by those who oppose them. Nothing short of a yes man will satisfy the power-driven boss. Affiliation-driven bosses want to be liked and popular. They put relationships first, but supporting incompetent employees is not good for business. Working for this person means plowing through a bunch of sycophants to get to him. It will be next to impossible to edit out the bad advice his cronies have given him, but you've got to give it a try to save the company. Your job depends on being sociable and helping to manage minion interactions. You need emotional intelligence to cope with an affiliation boss. Achievement-motivated bosses are competitive individuals who like a challenge but hate to lose. They delight in showing off all their cups and shields. These bosses love to be the center of attention and won't be left out of any event, be it a little office party or a grand award ceremony. Bosses motivated by achievement need to be included in everything. Working for this person means stroking their ego and making sure they get their information before anyone else does. What your interview reveals about the boss. You will most likely meet your boss when you interview for a job. Since you could become a part of their team, he or she will no doubt want to know if you will be suitable or not. In the same way, you should not only be concerned with getting the job but also scrutinize your prospective boss to see if they will be compatible with you. Ask questions. Interview the boss too. How he responds will tell you all you need to know about his personality and work ethic. If you have a good sense of people, you will be quick to pick up positives or negatives right there and then. If not, you will fortunately or unfortunately get to know this person on the job through trial and error. These suggestions may prove to be helpful during that first interview with your prospective boss. The focus is on you if the interview questions center around you and your ambitions, and you are allowed to express yourself without being interrupted. This boss is interested in the person you are. If you are able to, the interview is structured. If the interview and the interviewer are well prepared, you can be sure that this boss is organized and runs a tight ship. He likes to manage his team and ensure they work at full capacity. He can be impatient though if you ask questions that have already been answered, though at times he may help you along grudgingly. Expect rigid routines and a boss who is mainly interested in getting the job done well. Composure and warmth. The atmosphere is relaxed and the interviewer puts you at ease with a friendly, calm attitude. This boss is interested in creating amiability in the workplace, but have no doubt that he is observing the real you in spite of your answers to his questions. He is good to work with and likes to interact with his team. While this boss prefers a relaxed work environment, there will be no let-up in productivity and quality. Full attention on you is your future boss, asking you questions and seem interested in your responses. Does he look you in the eye and take the time to answer you seriously? Do you feel he is not only listening but hearing what you say? Is he transparent about company details that affect you, such as salary, bonuses, and other benefits? If all the answers are positive, this is a good, well-informed boss who is aware of any snags on the job and is quick to sort out problems. He keeps his team connected and production flowing smoothly. Negative or positive remarks. The way in which a boss speaks about his team says a lot about his character and how you will be treated by him. If he refers to his employees in a positive manner, identifying them and mentioning their skills, you know this person recognizes his people and respects his relationships with them. This is the sort of boss who will appreciate you. If he speaks about workers in a derogatory way, you can be sure this is not a person you want to work with. Impressive environment. As you grab a cup of coffee in the cafeteria and walk through the office to your interview, you can't help notice your surroundings. Area. You observe the employees and their workspaces. Are both cheery and efficient? Do you notice fear when an employee enters the boss's office, or is he or she relaxed and smiling? Read these obvious signals to know if this is an environment you want to work in. Summing up, much analysis of the professional environment has been covered in this chapter. What is, and is not satisfactory in the workplace has been detailed. Acceptable and unacceptable behaviors have been outlined. Office relationships and employee habits have been scrutinized with suggestions made for a more conducive atmospheres. How one presents himself or herself when giving a speech has also been explained, along with do's and don'ts for subject relevance, optimum projection, and audience appreciation. Emphasis has been given to the types of bosses that head a company or team. How characteristics drive a boss's behavior and actions and the impact an employee are spelled out. What to look out for in bosses, and how to recognize their characteristics during that first interview is described. It is imperative to have a professional working environment in which a culture of shared trust and respect is the norm. Employees thrive when they work in a well-organized, efficient company with a well-meaning, smart boss. Good management practice demands there must be transparency and fairness in dealings. A free flow of information and directives channel perspectives and energy towards productive outcomes. Toxic individuals and processes will adversely affect the overall health of the whole organization, so it is important to know what you are working with. Chapter 10. Assessing romantic links. Romance features in our lives at one time or another, and this chapter analyzes this subject in connection to romantic partners. By assessing a prospective or current romantic partner, we get a clear picture of who they really are and where this relationship is likely to end up. The information you uncover will make you realize things about your partner that you never saw before. These discoveries could lead to understandings that alleviate conflict and create a more harmonious and loving partnership. On the other hand, what you learn could confirm what you've been thinking for a while now: this person isn't right for you after all. There are particular mannerisms used to communicate with dates or partners. Body language, facial movements, and the way we speak can determine a partner's attitude and intention. Let's see if what we find out can help us move in the right direction. Examining the beginning. Everything is so exciting during the early days of a romance. The person you have begun to date is fascinating and mysterious. You may have known this individual before, but since romance has crept into the picture, he or she is a whole other person, and getting to know him or her brings a new, thrilling beginning to the relationship. A questioning mind will ask, is this person interested in you in a romantic way? Secondly, do you really want to spend time with this person? In your enthusiasm, you can misread the signals and mistake friendliness and affection for romantic attachment. You enjoy the date so much you imagine you can spend many joyous hours together. Step out of your romantic haze for a moment and read the signs that are being sent out loud and clear. It may be hard to tell where you stand after that first date. Is it an awkward meeting? Do you have to do all the talking? Does your date's body language express a desire to have a romantic connection with you? Does he or she keep their body turned to face you? A person is meant to like you if they keep their belly button facing you. Are you being touched? Touching means the person is reaching out in an effort to get closer to you, to get to know you better. Facial expressions will tell you whether your date is feeling it or not. Do his eyes say you're the one? Does he smile when he looks at you? Folded arms could either mean you're being shut out or your date is anxious and doesn't want to show any nervousness. Can you tell the difference? You've decided you want to continue seeing this person because you got along famously. Said it all. But what do you really know about this person? What about character and beliefs? Has conversation revealed whether this person is outgoing or stressed? What was discussed and how detailed was the conversation? How did he or she react to your questions? Does this person like to talk about themselves or like to gossip? What levels of respect do you notice, for you, for others, and themselves? You are not overthinking the process. You are just being smart about your own future. When you start dating a person, you want to know that there are shared values and common interests that will lead to a romantic relationship and hopefully, bright prospects. Read and analyze the signs. There's always something new to discover about a person, and your analytical skills should be applied however long you've been in a romantic relationship. Just because you've been together for ages, there's no need to be careless about your interaction with your partner. Actions have consequences, and you don't want to be negatively affected by any untoward behavior. A partner doesn't change overnight from an outgoing, positive individual into a negative, cynical, nasty person. The signs were there all along, you just ignored them. Analyzing behavior clarifies relationship issues and gives you insights to work with for positive outcomes. There's no need to become compulsive and second-guess every move your romantic partner makes. If you don't know when analysis is important, just answer these questions from observing your partner's physical and verbal responses to relative situations. How do they treat others? The question here is, how does your romantic partner treat others? Does this person have respect for others, or is she critical, defensive, or show contempt? How are family, friends, colleagues, and strangers treated? The way your partner treats others reflects how they feel about themselves, though they may not admit it. If they respond positively to others, they will do the same with all issues they have to deal with. If your date treats the server with contempt, that is a red flag not to be ignored. While he or she tries to show contempt for someone they deems inferior and undeserving of respect, it should be obvious to you that this person has some major problems with their internal dialogue. How do they respond to challenges? People show their true colors when they are under stress. Ask yourself how your partner responds when faced with challenging situations. Do they have the ability to remain calm or take things personally? Are things fine as long as they get their way? Do they become defensive or belligerent when they are at a disadvantage, or fly off the handle at the slightest provocation? Do they allow emotions to get in the way of dealing with situations effectively, and justify their negative thought processes and harmful responses? Most importantly, ask yourself if your partner understands the meaning of the word no. People can alter behavior through motivation and guidance, but there are no guarantees that this leopard will ever change his or her spots. How is their annoyance expressed? Ask yourself how your partner shows anger. Do they erupt loudly and break things to demonstrate their rage? Do they feel it is okay to take out their anger on others? Are they constantly frustrated and annoyed and take every opportunity to erupt verbally or even physically? Is destructive behavior displayed in the heat of the moment? This person is not simply letting off steam. There's a problem with self-control here, and this individual lacks the maturity to express issues calmly and logically. Such behavior, if left unchecked, will erode the quality of your lives. Don't make excuses for being in an abusive relationship. Deal with it or get out. Do they talk or listen? Talking and listening are important for knowing how your partner feels, showing your feelings, and solving any difficulties that may arise within a relationship. For these significant reasons, you must ask yourself if your partner does all the talking and none of the listening. Such behavior shows a lack of consideration for your opinions. In no way are your feelings going to be a priority in this relationship. Perhaps your partner listens but does not respond. It could mean he's not the talkative type, or he is thinking carefully about a reply, or maybe you intimidate him or her into silence. Feeling consistently unheard is extremely frustrating and blocks progress. Communication is vital for a good relationship, so ask your partner what the problem is and work through it. Are they jealous? Is your partner possessive about you? This may be sweet in the early stages of your relationship, but this behavior will attention is shared with other people. A jealous partner has a problem with trusting others. Does he follow you and watch your interactions in social settings and later accuse you of all manner of indiscretions? Any independent action by you makes this person feel they are losing their grip on you. Jealousy is a sign of insecurity. Your partner may also display possessive behavior to control or dominate. Make sure you know the difference between loving and controlling, and don't be intimidated by a jealous partner. Summing up, by examining and evaluating a partner, significant facts about this person will come to light. You will find out what type of person your partner is, and whether there is the right chemistry between you both. There's no need to make it obvious that you are studying your romantic partner. If he or she knows they are being observed for a reason, they will feel awkward and will not respond naturally. Ask questions casually in conversation. If you bring up likes and dislikes, you can always say, "I like to work out every day and read before I sleep. What are your favorite things to do?" Or, "My parents are the most important people in my life." Who is the most important person in your life? Check out dislikes. Ask for opinions and preferences. Inquire about family and friends. Hopefully your partner will respond openly, and there will be a lot of revealing messages in these answers. If there are any red flags, they should pop up during the analysis. This information could make or break the relationship. It could strengthen your bond and bring you closer together. Who knows? You both might even fall in love with each other. Or else the feedback you get may expose the cold, callous person your partner really is. Remember, forewarned is forearmed. Whatever the outcome, getting an accurate analysis of your romantic partner. Chapter 11. Cutting-edge techniques. So far, we've looked at the basic foundations of analyzing people, such as gestures and mannerisms, countenance-based clues, and words that are used. We've also looked at ways of reading people in corporate environments as well as those in personal relationships with you. There are still some more things we need to have a look at though, as it is not always easy to analyze people, and you need to be able to find the subtle little clues that will give you more details. In this next chapter, we'll be looking at those tiny bodily messages that people send unconsciously, and at subtle facial expressions that can give you hints about what the person is thinking. Certain ways of talking and special words people use can also tell you a lot about them. We'll end off by telling you about a method of assessing someone's personality type quickly and easily. Tiny and inconspicuous signs. Some movements that people make are very tiny and very quick, and if you're not looking carefully you'll miss them. Only a very observant person will pick them up. For example, people who want to assert their authority, or who are very dominant characters, will slowly move nearer and nearer to the other person, until they begin to feel as if they should take a step backwards. The authoritative person may also lean forwards, thus invading the other person's sense of space. Moving close can also mean that they like the other person, but it is usually fairly easy to tell the difference. So, when you come across a person who tends to always stand too close to others, you can safely conclude that they want everyone to understand that they're the one in control. The opposite type of personality, timid, insecure people, may subtly keep fidgeting with their clothes. People who think they're overweight tend to pull at their clothing, pulling it away from the parts of their body that they don't want it clinging to, lest people see it clinging and notice how fat they are. They usually do this very fast and inconspicuously. We've spoken in a previous chapter about how to know when you're out on a date whether a person likes you or not, but how about in a group setting? How do you tell if they like you if they aren't sitting nearby? In this case, you won't be able to read the usual body signs like leaning close and so on. Well, you can watch what they do when someone else makes a joke. If they like you, they'll normally look your way, watching to see if you're laughing before they do, as they want to see first if it is acceptable to you if they laugh. They subconsciously will want to say, "We have the same sense of humor." Minute but important. Micro-expressions are subtle, tiny expressions of the face that people have very little control over. Professionals, such as interrogators, watch these expressions to try to read what someone is thinking and feeling. Micro-expressions are largely involuntary, so are extremely difficult to control or manipulate. They often appear for just a millisecond. It's been concluded that there are about 7 basic feelings that can be shown by them: shock, repugnance, dread, rage, grief, joy, and hatred. Shock, surprise. The eyes open wide, showing the whites of the eyes all round. The brows rise and cause the forehead to wrinkle up. The jaw may even drop open. Repugnance. Disgust or distaste is usually shown by the nose crinkling up, causing the top lip to curl upwards. The person will look as though they have smelled a terrible odor. Dread. Fear or dread are normally shown by the person's eyebrows drawing together in a straight line. The whites of the eyes show at the top of the eyes, not the bottom. The mouth opens and the lips become rigid. Rage. Anger causes the brow to lower and the eyebrows to come together in a frown. The eyes become fiery, and may even protrude slightly. The mouth tightens into a straight line, or turns downwards. The jaw thrusts forward and tightens up. The nose flares out. Grief. Sadness turns down the corners of the mouth, and the lower lip may protrude slightly. The inner edges of the brows pull in and are slightly raised. The eye. Joy. Happiness will cause the outer corners of the eyes to crinkle up, especially when the mouth smiles. The lips turn up in a way that also lifts the cheeks. Hatred. Contempt is usually a swifter facial expression, often quickly hidden. Sometimes it shows by one side of the mouth lifting in a sneer, or maybe subtler, almost like a smile. The importance of words. As a person speaks, you can learn a lot about them just from the type of words they say. For instance, it is possible to estimate a person's age by noting the ratio of positive to negative words they speak. The older a person is, the more positively emotive words they normally use. Older people also tend to use more verbs in the future tense. There are many other things you can pick up from a person's words, whether they're being honest or not. When a person is being truthful, they'll tend to use more first-person singular words, such as he or I. They'll also tend to use words that present both sides of the story, such as perhaps and maybe. The use of these nuanced words also hints at a higher intelligence level than those who use absolutes. People who are not being honest will tend to use more definite, absolute words, such as he definitely and absolutely, whether or not they're depressed. Self-centered, inward-looking people who say a lot of first-person singular words like I and me have a tendency towards depression. The use of these words all the time reveals feelings of isolation and loneliness. Easy way to assess personality type. How quickly can you decide what personality type someone has? If you know what to look for and are alert to the tiny signs, you can get a reasonably accurate idea pretty quickly. Firstly, you need to decide if they're an introvert or an extrovert. Notice carefully how long it takes them to answer when they are questioned. Introverts tend not to answer immediately, and will usually hesitate and give the question thought. Extroverts tend to answer at once, almost seeming to think aloud as they do so. Secondly, you need to look at if they're a future-based or present-based individual. That is, if they live in the now and are largely focused on the present moment, they can be considered a sensing type of person. They'll be attuned, with all their senses, to the sights, sounds, and action going on around them. They'll tend to be more observant and will notice small details that others miss. An intuition type of personality, however, will be more focused on the future, planning their next move, thinking ahead, and trying to assess what's going to happen next. Thirdly, you can look at how the person copes when plans get changed. If they are okay with change, and fit in, going along with the new plans, then this is another sign that they are more present-based, and not easily shaken up when change happens. People who struggle with change tend to be future-based individuals who plan and schedule ahead, and like things to be organized ahead of time. They'll become easily irritated by people who don't think ahead and are more impulsive. An interesting method of learning more about what kind of person someone is to find out what type of music they enjoy. Intelligent and emotionally balanced types have a tendency to prefer classical music, or jazz. Those who like heavy metal and rock tend to be intelligent and honest. Light-hearted music such as pop, country, or gospel tends to appeal to outwardly friendly, easygoing types of people, who are fairly conservative. Really open, friendly extroverts usually go with rap and hip-hop. Social media give a big window into people's personalities. Just by looking at someone's Facebook pages you'll see what their views are on religion, politics, and travel. It'll tell you how family-oriented they are, whether they're a private sort of person or not, and if they're an introvert or extrovert. To sum up, these advanced techniques for personality analysis are extremely useful for those who work with a lot of people. Learning to read body language and the faint expressions that flicker across people's faces can be a very valuable skill, giving you a great deal of insight. It's a useful. Remember that emotions never stay inward, they always have an outward manifestation, no matter how tiny. Just by careful observation, you'll be able to tell how comfortable someone is, and whether they're telling the truth or not. You'll be able to look at tiny details like how someone moves their eyes or crosses their legs, and it will be meaningful to you. Do keep in mind though that everyone is a unique individual, and try not to take a one-size-fits-all approach. There are many advantages to being able to analyze people well. Namely, so that you can better relate to work colleagues and be more empathetic towards them. It can also help you to keep your supervisors happy, and understand how they cope with stress and deadlines. This knowledge should help you in social situations as well, as you begin to pick up on the subtle things that people leave unsaid. Hopefully it helps in dating situations, to help you make better relationship decisions. When you understand someone's personality type and why they react in certain ways, it can go a long way to minimizing misunderstandings and confusion about motives, leading to more peaceful interactions all round. To conclude, thanks for making it to the end of the book. Hopefully you worked through the exercises and have come away with some practical ways of learning more about those around you. You should also have new insight into yourself and your own personality. These techniques can be used to improve the lives of those around you, as well as your own. It's so important now that you apply your new skills in everyday situations, as the more you practice, the better you'll become at it. It's also vital to remember that none of these methods is a way of totally knowing someone. They need to be used all together and built on to form a complete picture. As with most things, it is a good idea to begin with knowing yourself, which is a lifelong procedure, but totally worth it. Watch how you react in various settings, see what emotions arise and fade at various times, and note how your voice changes in certain scenarios.